months. We're now at the July 29th budget work session, and then just a couple more opportunities before we ask the council to adopt the budget on August 24th. One of the things that we did is look at all the community feedback and the surveys and information that we'd received from the community to build this budget. This is a recap of some of the things I talked to you about on July 6th, but these are all the survey results, and so Pervez, if you could kind of just flip through those and to the next chart. This is again a word cloud of some of the things that were really important. People want change, restaurants, roads, traffic, and you'll see the budget try to address all these particular things that came up in that particular survey. The budget is really built around these 7 different areas, and again, we talked about these. There's a few changes that I want to talk about as we go through this, but let's quickly walk through community engagement. Again, this is the you're trying to mess me up. See if I can see it. Community engagement. So we have the quarterly mailer is one of the things that we're proposing to have in this budget, as well as a new audio and film production specialist position to help us with providing some more videos. We're finding those are more and more popular to get out in the public realm. Next slide. Economic development and business retention. Several different things that we're doing here. And one of the elements that I did want to talk about is we did revise this from the original July 6th presentation. So you'll see in that 3rd bullet point, one of the things that we told you before was creating an infrastructure plan for the development of retail centers and grocery stores on the east side of the city. But this budget and the proposed budget that I've given to you actually includes real dollars to do that. It includes $2 million to begin the design of Go Forth, and this is from the Limestone Creek development all the way up to FM 150. That's just the design. It does not include construction. That will be another phase that we'll have to work through with either the property owner or a developer to help us work through that, or potentially fund it all on our own. But we do have $2 million for the design of that roadway. And then additionally, we have $2 million for the design of extending water and wastewater lines to that particular area. The goal for that is to try to identify that retail center and grocery store that I know the council's been focused on. I think, is there a question? Yes, sir.
I just have a quick question. When you talk about promoting mixed-use developments, which is not something that I'm totally for, my question is, how do we confirm the price points and what are our price points to make sure that we're not getting rent that's more expensive than a mortgage?
Yeah, so this is really one of the comments that we got back from the public was wanting to make sure they had diversity of housing and affordable housing options. And the point here is that when we're bringing forward developments, we're not only going to have just single-family developments, which typically can be more expensive, that we're going to be open to other ideas that will have lots of different options. There will be no price controls or anything like that from the city standpoint, but when you have that diversity of housing, you have opportunities to have lots of different price points. So it's to be market driven, but the idea would be there's lots of choices for the community, whether it's townhomes, apartments, single family homes, those kinds of things, lots of different ones will be available.
Okay, so there's no real confirmation that those price points are going to be lower than, say, a mortgage?
No, not right now. And I think there are some communities that don't encourage mixed use, that don't encourage multifamily development, and that does have a definite price increase on some of the folks in their communities. But this proposal is different than that. Okay. Everything else here is the same, but I did want to call your attention to that on the east side development. On public safety, again, a big focus of the budget is on enhancing public safety. All of this is the same information that you saw before, so there's several new positions across the police department organization. And one of the things that we talked about last time is this budget does include monies for conducting a staffing study of the police department, and this would be a long-term staffing study that we would look at. And based on that staffing study, we would then want to bring forward some new things to implement. So the budget also includes $250,000 for the implementation of whatever those recommendations will be. And the chief and I will be coming back in the future to walk you through that process. You've seen this before, just the number of officers per 1,000 residents. Kyle's somewhere in the middle. This is a somewhat simplistic analysis that we have. It doesn't look at all of the transportation issues, types of calls, all those things, but we think this is at least a good starting point to start looking at things. When we do the staffing study, we'll bring you a lot more data and demographic information so you can understand that going forward. Technology and equipment, these are some of the different things for public safety. Again, none of these have changed, so we'll keep moving. Market-based employee compensation and benefits program. Again, we wanted to, one of the things we had proposed to you in July and this budget does is make sure that we have good benchmarks. So we have identified these 10 cities to target in the corridor that we would use as benchmarks. We're using those for compensation. We're also using them for benefit comparisons, and I'm going to show you some information in a moment that will compare that. These are all the elements that are included for compensation, our merit increases, the police step increases, a review of the deferred compensation plan based on our study of the pay plan. We've also included some dollars to help us make adjustments that will be necessary. The equity-based adjustments is $400,000. That compensation study is $75,000 to do that work. And then we'll continue to review our health insurance plan. One of the things that we're looking at is whether or not we need to do a self-funded plan going forward. We think we're at the size now where that potentially makes sense. So this is a new slide, slide 16. I wanted to share this with you. If you look at, this is a busy slide, but at the top of the chart, you'll see the employee contributions, and for just an employee, where an employee has an option to select just themselves, or they can select themselves and a spouse, themselves and a child, or themselves and their entire family. And you can see the number of employees that select that. I'm walking from left to right through there. The total monthly premium, so this is the total cost to the city for these coverages that are there, and then what the city contributes. So you can see on this particular chart that currently the city pays for 100% of the employee's cost, but does not pay any cost towards dependent coverage. And when you look at then what that means that the employee has to pay on a monthly basis, it's very high rates, is my opinion. I'm going to show you that in a moment. But for an employee with their spouse, it's $729 a month. Employee with their children is $518 a month. And employee plus family is $1,145 per month. We've found that that's a very expensive premium for employees to afford, particularly if you look at the average wage of a city employee, which is $45,000 to $50,000. It's very difficult for people to afford $1,100 a month. And you see that in the utilization of the plan. We only have 7 employees that select family coverage, we believe because of the cost. So what's on the bottom of the chart is a proposal to add a component to the plan that the city pays 65% of the dependent coverages for spouse, children, or family plans, and that would significantly drop the premiums for employees. You can see for an employee, it would go from employee with a spouse, it would go from $729 a month to $255. An employee with children from $518 to $181, and the family coverage drops significantly from $1,144 to $400 per month. If I could go to the next slide, and then I'll pause here to see if there's any questions. I did want to show you that comparison with all of the other cities, the benchmark cities that we looked at. On the very right-hand column in red is our current plan. And I know this is a busy slide, but this is the percentage of that the city contributes for any of these premiums. So in the blue, 100% for us is what the city pays for employees, which is 100%. But all of the other numbers for Kyle is 0. We don't pay anything. And you can see versus all of these other cities, we're significantly different in that regard, and that significantly affects the premiums that employees pay. So what we're proposing is the 65%, which is in the middle of the chart in this green color, which would put us in the middle of the cities that we're comparing to. So I'm going to pause here for a moment, just see if there's any questions on that. I think I saw Yvonne had a question.
No, I don't have any questions. I just want to say thank you for bringing this to our attention. Usually you work in the public sector for the benefits, certainly not the pay. So seeing how much it was really concerning for me, and then seeing how many of our employees have their families covered was really eye-opening. And so I just wanted to say thank you for bringing this to our attention. I think this is important for us to address.
I believe we voted on this about a year or two ago, going with United Healthcare, is that who we're with?
Yes,
Okay. So it's good to see the numbers now from when we first started to see where we're at. And if it's something that where the employees are feeling more of a pinch at the end of the month or, and we all know the rising cost of healthcare and medications and so forth. I think this would, not only be something as far as you could use as a recruiting tool on that to show that, you know, the city supports that, but it's, we just gotta look at the overall of what the employees are facing. And
Yes,
so,
sir.
You know, it's good to see that we can see the numbers finally. We can kind of see where we're at, how much the employees are paying.
That's great. Well, I appreciate that. I think for some of our employees, and over the course of my career, it's always been a challenge where you were giving out merit increases, but you're at the same time you're increasing health insurance premiums, and a lot of employees would say, I've gotten a raise, but the health insurance premium is really taking up all that raise, or in some cases, I'm going negative because of the cost. So this is actually going to be different this year. We're going to have a very sharp decrease in the premiums for employees at the same time as providing merit increases. So we're excited to be able to do that. And this budget includes the funding to do these things.
If I could just have one follow-up on this, what would be the percentage the city would pay as a whole if we to go with the 65%? Like,
What do you mean, what percentage?
how much of the budget that city, a dollar amount as far as what the cities would contribute to the employees? That's
It'd probably it'd be
600,000?
the average between that 100% and the
Okay,
65. So it's
600,000,
probably around
okay.
80-something percent if you dollar-weighted averaged it out.
Okay, I
I'd have
can
to
see
look
that
at the
there.
actual calculation. Pervez, do you have a number on that?
Yes. So the additional cost to the city to move to 65% participation for the city to pay for the employees is an additional $603,000, which the proposed budget includes in it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Travis, for showing that.
Is that assuming that everybody would be on the plan?
No, we've made some assumptions of working with our benefits consultant of how the coverages would shift. And if on slide 16, you can see how we think there'll be more people on the employee plus spouse, more people on the employee plus children and family. It's an estimate based on their utilizations that they see, but could be higher or lower.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, let's keep rolling. Street maintenance, another major component of this budget is to increase street maintenance. We talked about this quite a bit at the last meeting, but we're adding $2.3 million. This is to reconstruct the roadways for Goforth and Heidenreich. That's in the budget, and we also are increasing the street maintenance from $750,000 per year to $1 million per year, and these are all the roads that are planned. And we'll just kind of go through some of these. I'm not going to go through these slides, but these are the calculations, the links of the segments that are included in the budget on the roadways. These were all the same as what you saw last time, so we'll just kind of flip through these unless there's any questions. Yes, ma'am.
So how was it, how was Heidenreich chosen?
I know I advocated for that.
Okay, yeah, so, and we can advocate, but my question is, there has to be some kind of supporting documents as to like why? And I'm just genuinely curious, what staff found out about Heidenreich that made it a priority.
Yeah, I think we looked at the quality of the roadways, and there's an actual calculation of the pavement condition. There's an index that you can calculate to see what that pavement condition is. Working with our public works team, we also looked at how much these roads were traveled. So you could have a road that's not traveled very often that has a poor score, but we've ranked the ones that are traveled more frequently higher than that. So that's how these two were selected. And Harper, I know I'm catching you on the cuff here, but if you have any other details about Heidenreich, I think it'd be good to share those.
And that is a very bad road, and we've discussed it before, but several council members brought up Heidenreich and Goforth from the Cassetta Roundabout to BB Road, and so we knew that was a high priority for.
And if I may add to that,
Yes.
this was conversations I had with the residents. And I basically went through, see how many of these roads have been addressed by each resident. This one was one of the top ones that most residents address as in need. And then we did drive up, with council member Tobias just to see those roads. I know these ones were a big priority.
Both of those roads are north-south cut-throughs used regularly.
Okay, how much of that road is in this Kyle city limits? I know some of it's in the county.
It goes, I don't have the exact distance on in hand right now, but it goes all the way down to where the new wastewater treatment plant entrance is. And that would be what we were going to work. We asked about going to the bridge just to make it consistent and continuous all the way to the bridge. But if you go to the bridge, you're actually out of the city limits. So I don't have the distance, but if you drive down Heidenreich, you can see all the way to our treatment plant entrance.
Okay, so will that include just maintenance or expanding it?
That's full depth repair,
Reconstruction. Reconstruction.
Thank you,
as well as go forth will be full depth repair.
thank you.
Bet. Okay, so continuing on, organizational excellence is also one of the things we looked at, and looking at the organization, the positions that we have, trying to understand what we need from a staff perspective. So the budget has several changes in this. 3 positions have been recommended to be eliminated. That's for about $460,000 in savings. There's also a chief development officer position that's being proposed in the budget. We've talked about that, as well as a new purchasing and contract compliance work unit. The budget also includes the addition of an in-house city attorney position. As the city continues to grow and have a more increasingly complex organization, we feel like we need that position to assist us on a daily basis. This is another chart that we've added. This is new from last time, but one of the things that I wanted to try to look at is the number of employees that we have per 1,000 residents versus those 10 benchmark cities that we looked at before. This is, again, somewhat of a simplistic analysis. Some of the cities have different services, different operations, but just as a quick benchmark, you can see we're very efficient here at the city of Kyle. We have a few employees for the size of population that we have. We're doing a lot of different things. We'll continue to look at this more in the future. Future budgets will provide you a little bit more detail of how we can compare ourselves to these other cities and direct lines of service. So Austin, for example, may have an airport. They do have an airport, other operations, so there are probably some things that are not apples to apples here. But if you look at Leander or Buda, those cities, it's very, very comparable. Yes, sir?
Hey, Brian, I just want to backtrack, I guess, on the facility manager. Since we're eliminating that position, but we're hiring a chief development officer. The question is, currently, if the library has a problem, water leak or air conditioner out, or Parks and Recs building does, how is the city notified from that, the personnel in the buildings? So I want to make sure that,
Ask Jerry to answer that.
yeah, we don't end up with a lot of deteriorated
Yeah,
in
absolutely. No, that's.
buildings, because we don't have a supervisor.
Yes, sir. We're looking to restructure the facilities area, so I'll let Jerry comment on that.
Yes, sir. For the record, Jerry Hendricks, Assistant City Manager. We're reorganizing that department, and the current division manager for environmental trades and services we're combining that with facilities. Chance has been with
Sure.
ES&T since it was formed, and worked very closely with the facilities. And we think it's time to combine those two for efficiencies. And in terms of notification about building maintenance needs, there's a request for services feed that employees have direct access to, and email that. It goes straight to the administrative assistant for that group, as well as to Chance, and they jump on those things immediately. It's usually instantaneous that they see it and respond very quickly. And in terms of preventive maintenance, we have a schedule for all the buildings, all the air conditioning systems, all the cleaning. It's all scheduled.
Thanks, Jerry, because last year I did see, we approved some contracts for more ACs and heaters here.
And all those have been
So my
replaced.
worry was, are we still going to have a person that gets notifications?
Yes.
hey, stuff
Multiple
is
people.
broken, Stuff is broken.
And I get copied on those ROSs too, so multiple people can see those.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's fine.
All right, just a couple more slides for me, and then we get to the fun stuff with Prevez. So this was the fun stuff, right? Strategic planning, again, as I've talked to you guys in the past about, one of the things I'd like to do is have a strategic planning retreat this fall. We do have some funding in that to look at that, develop a citywide strategic plan based on the input of council. Jerry's going to be working with us to try to connect all the various master plans that we have with that strategic plan, the comprehensive plan, so that we have a complete vision and work plan for the city going forward. The budget is developed with a long-term focus, so rather than just showing you a number for next fiscal year, we're trying to show you a long-term financial plan. So for each of the major funds, there is a 5-year financial plan that's associated with it. We've included a lot of those documents in here. We'll go through them in some level of detail. We do have the TERS funds in here that we added. I know there was some discussion about that last year, or last month when we went through the details, but all of the funds are looked at from a long-term basis. We don't want to make decisions today that we can't pay for in the future. So that's how we've developed the budget. Yes, sure.
So, let me see. I'm on the next page, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Right there.
You're already ahead. Okay, well, that's all I have. Unless you have questions for me, I'm going to ask Perez to go through the detailed financials with you. Again, much of this will be the same, but we'll try to go through it expeditiously.
Just go back to 20, just to clarify on Greg Road Ranger. That's obviously in front of the swimming pool, correct? So that's going to get redone?
Harper, the question is,
Greg
in front
Road.
of Greg Road in front of the swimming pool, that's going to be done with the chip seal?
Yes, sir. Greg Road from Ranger to Veterans
Okay.
in October.
Okay, and then on slide 11, again, Chief, are we looking at possibly doing an in-house promotion, or are we going to look outside for a professional or somebody that's already has the certifications for the mental health?
The first part is internal. These officers would come from internal staff, and then we would backfill their entry-level position. Most of our officers are already trained to the basic level mental health officer. Some even have the intermediate and advanced level trainings. So we have some good officers to choose from for that.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that introductory section? No, we'll go back to slide 27. All right, Pervez, thank you.
So good morning, council. Now that everybody has their breakfast done, we'll get to the financial stuff. So before I start, I would like to remind council that from this point forward, the rules slightly change. So far, budget work session 1 and 2 were exercises between council and staff. From this point forward, once the city manager releases the proposed budget, based on the city charter, any changes to the budget will have to be an amendment to the proposed budget, and council will must take a vote. Secondly, the state law also kicks in regarding property tax requirements, notices, moving forward. You will see on your agenda for today, there's an item. The second item on the agenda is a resolution to record council's vote. And I'll describe that in detail as we get to the tax rate slides. But please keep in mind that any changes you would like to make would have to be in the form of a motion, an amendment to the city manager's proposed budget based on city charter requirements. So we have seen this slide before. This is the city's overall fund structure. And the fund structure is very similar to an organization chart. It shows you how the city's budget is set up and how it's accounted for and tracked. I won't go into the details. We've gone over this before, but to give you an idea, on the left side, the governmental funds are the funds that we account tax-supported activities and function, and the proprietary funds in the middle, these are the business-type activities and functions of the city. About 70% of our funds, we have a total of 50 funds, and we keep adding some. So I think next fiscal year, we're going to be about 55 to 60 funds. Of the budget that's proposed, we have 50 separate funds in it, and 70% of those are tax-supported activities and functions. 30% of those funds are business-type activities. So based on the overall fund structure, the city manager's proposed budget for all 50 funds put together is $250,690,888. Another thing to keep in mind as we go through, while the numbers may seem boring, there are some aspects of it that I must read into the record, so please bear with me. So this is the overall 50 funds of 250 million. And if you notice, I'll point out the largest share of the budget is CIP projects, which is about 62%. The second is general fund, 22% or $55 million. The third is water utility, 6% or $16 million. The fourth is debt service, 5% or $13 million.
All right, going back to the funds on slide 28, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this one. It says transportation, $0. Does that mean we don't have that does not take into effect or consideration the Uber program at all?
No, we have a transportation fund that we budget, but for next fiscal year, the amount of money that we're spending out of that fund is so small that it doesn't pick up in the rounding. So when we get to the CIP budget, I will show you how much of that is coming from transportation fund.
Okay, and then under the general fund CIP, the 15.12 million, can you tell me how much of those is roads and how much of those?
We will show you
Oh, yeah,
that.
sure.
We have
Okay.
detailed slides to show you
Okay, I looked
exactly that.
Thank you.
So overall, of the $251 million proposed budget for all city funds, 176.6 is for CIP spending. Next fiscal year planned, 33 new positions for a cost, 33 new positions for a total of 390 net positions after we eliminate the 3 positions that the city manager talked about. Our proposed city manager's budget includes a proposed tax rate of 46.93 cents. This is the same rate as the voter approval tax rate that we just received from the tax assessor collector. The property tax rates are certified and calculated in Hays County by the tax assessor collector for all taxing jurisdictions. So when we received our rate calculations from the Hays County tax assessor collector, the voter approval tax rate is 46.93, which is the same rate as what the city manager is proposing for next year. In comparison, the current rate today is 50.82 cents. The city manager's proposed budget does not include any increase for water service rates, no increase for wastewater service rates, no increase in storm drainage fees. The solid waste or trash services is going up slightly, 2.52% based on the contract we have with TDS. And the city staff is proposing 8 new fees, and we'll walk you through what those 8 fees are and why.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I thought that we were going to increase wastewater and water fees. Weren't we, I thought we were going to make a vote.
That is, I believe
Is that
you're
a
talking
separate
about
thing?
the impact fees, which is different than the typical service rates, which
Okay,
are
these are
here.
service rates.
Right, so
Okay.
the impact fees would be for new customers coming in
Sure.
that are connecting.
Okay.
Yes, sir, and that is coming in the future. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So far we've talked about the overall budget for all 50 funds. We're going to start drilling down. The city has 4 major operating funds, so we will talk about the 4 major operatings first. Then we will further drill down to individual funds that make up the 4 major operating funds of the city. The 4 major operating funds of the city are general fund, water utility fund, wastewater utility fund, and the storm drainage utility fund. So combined for those four major funds, the revenue is increasing by $2.4 million for property tax, just the M&O portion. This is assuming a 15% growth. $1.2 million increase in sales tax revenue, assuming a 10.2% growth. $1.8 million increase in development revenues with a 9% growth. $1 million increase in water service revenues, assuming a 6% growth in the customer base. $670,000 increase in wastewater service revenues. Again, we're assuming a 6% customer growth. $120,000 increase in storm drainage fees, assuming a 6% growth in customer base. Interest income, citywide, $3.6 million increase. As you well know, interest rates have been increasing in the last 12 to 16 months, and we are assuming that they will go up slightly. So based on our cash reserves and our investments, we are calculating that we will receive $3.6 million more in interest income next year.
Pervez?
Yes, sir.
Two quick questions. One is, like on the sales tax revenue growth, are you projecting that based on the actual sales tax receipts, or are you projecting that based on this current year's budgeted sales tax income?
So sales tax is growing so rapidly that the historical numbers don't make any sense anymore. So we have been projecting based on year over year. So when you compare between current budget to next year's proposed budget, is 10.2% increase. When you compare actual, what we estimate we're going to collect this year to what we think we're going to collect next year, is about 6%.
Okay, so I think that's an important, because so this year we collected 13% nearly year over year actual growth, 12.96% year over year actual growth. And so your projection for next year is 6%.
That's correct.
Okay.
And we're tightening that, Mayor, because if you look at the year-to-date sales tax collections, we're only 5% off.
Right.
So I think 6% is a good conservative number to assume at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah, but I do think it's conservative.
Yes, sir.
Especially with all the sales tax growth. I think it's very likely that we will double or triple that. So there's room there. And then the second question, when I remember it, I'll ask it. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is the overall revenues for the four major funds. Now we're going to get into the expenditures. The overall expenditures for the major four operating funds of the city, expenditures are going up by $10.2 million, or 15%. So I'm going to start first with the bottom of that screen that is in front of you. Of the $10.2 million increase, $8.9 million is in the general fund, which is the largest operating fund of the city. 8.9 represents about 87% of the total $10.2 million increase. $600,000 increase in water utility expenditures, $300,000 increase in wastewater utility fund expenditures, $400,000 in storm drainage. That makes up the 10.2. So what's driving these increases? So we'll go back to the top of the slide. $5.8 million, or 17%, is in personnel category, meaning new positions, payroll taxes, health insurance costs, merit increases, anything related to personnel is $5.8 million between the four operating funds. $2.9 million, or $3 million in round numbers, 11%, is in contractual expenditure category. This category captures those costs that are contracts, agreements, services that the city pays for to receive, whether they are attorneys, engineers, accountants, surveyors, that type, insurance, those types of activities fall in that category. 700,000 is for commodities. Commodities, this is where we buy office supplies, printing supplies. Anything of commodity nature is in that category. And lastly, $800,000 is for non-CIP capital. These are equipment, machinery, those types of expenses. So this is one of those slides that I'm going to have to read into the record, so please bear with me. The city manager's proposed budget is proposing to include 33 new positions, and I'll go through these real quick. You've seen these before. From left to right, we'll identify the department, the position title, how many positions, the budget amount that's included in the proposed budget. Please keep in mind that the budget amount is the total cost for that position, not only the compensation for that position, but also support costs, payroll taxes, insurance, office supplies, any equipment, laptop, vehicles. So it's all inclusive cost, not just the base wages. For building inspection, one chief development officer for a total cost of $199,745, and it is going to be paid from general fund. City manager's office, one city attorney, $290,951, paid with general fund. City manager's office, one grant administrator position for a total cost of $119,483. Source of funding is general fund. City secretary's office, one administrative assistant for a total cost of $67,517. Source of funding is general fund. Communications department, audio and film specialist, $63,155. Source of funding is general fund. Engineering department, one engineer in training for $93,381. The source of funding is from water and wastewater utility fund. A storm drainage inspector position in the engineering department for a total cost of $99,864. This position will be paid exclusively from the storm drainage utility fund. For the beautification and facilities department, we have 3 beautification technicians for a total cost of $199,750, will be paid from general fund. In the facilities maintenance division, we have 2 building maintenance technician positions for a total cost of $107,629 to be paid from general fund. Financial services, purchasing manager for $125,565 to be paid from general fund. Another purchasing technician position for a cost of $98,202 paid from general fund. And then a city controller position for the finance department for a total cost of $179,162 to be paid from general fund. For our library department, we have an outreach children's librarian position for $74,841 to be paid from general fund. For our Parks Department, we have a number of positions. Assistant Director for a total cost of $143,805 from general fund. A Certified Therapeutic Recreation Specialist for a cost of $75,704 to be paid from general fund. A Recreation Programmer for Athletics Program, $75,704, paid from general fund. A Pool Maintenance Technician position for a cost of $65,464 to be paid from general fund. 3 Parks Maintenance Technician positions for a total cost of $189,094 to be paid from general fund. A Parks Maintenance Crew Leader for a cost of $70,232 to be paid from general fund. Now we move on to Police Department. They have a total of 6 positions. 1 Narcotics Investigator for a total cost of $88,992, and all of the police department positions will be paid from general fund. 1 administrative assistant / HR specialist position for a cost of $74,386. 1 mental health officer position for a cost of $88,992. one equipment manager / quartermaster for a total cost of $79,698, one facility / fleet coordinator for a total cost of $79,698, one recruiting / background investigator position for a total cost of $88,992. Now for Public Works, we have three positions, and they will be paid from either water utility fund, wastewater utility fund, or a combination of both. One instrumentation technician, $85,430. One water production operator for $92,727, and one wastewater plant operator for $92,727. So that makes up the total new positions, 33, for a total cost of $3,110,890. As City Manager mentioned earlier, we are eliminating, and the proposed budget eliminates 3 vacant positions for a total cost of $460,300. So the net increase is a total of 30 positions, and the total cost is $2,650,000 and $590. Real briefly, the new equipment requested by various departments totals $2.4 million, and all of the details, what makes up this number, is in your packet in the budget document. CIP spending plan for the 5-year CIP for the next year of the 5-year spending plan. The proposed budget includes $176,549,855. And what is, yes, ma'am?
No, you go ahead. The TxDOT grant that's been applied for, do we have a status on that?
I don't know if Leon is here.
Oh, I'll say it louder. We're waiting till the end of the year to hear back from them. They're still in the running, but we're not sure what our chances are in getting those. We have 3 projects in there right now, so we're still waiting to hear from them. Should be later this year.
Okay, so if it's not, if the grant, if we don't get it, are we going to just pay out of the general fund?
We'll have to reassess, and I will let Bryan speak to that.
Yeah, potentially, we would look at coming back to you and potentially reallocating some of the CIP to get some of those projects done, but hopefully we'll be successful.
Okay, thank you.
We'll see.
So the proposed budget includes CIP spending plan for next year, a total of $176.6 million. What makes up that, real quickly? 9% is from general fund, $15.1 million. Next largest is 10% from GO bonds, 12% is from water utility, and then 14% is from the TxDOT grant, but the largest spending is 26% for the road bonds program. So now we're going to drill down to individually those 4 major operating funds, and we'll begin with general fund. You've seen this slide before. These are the key assumptions that we used to develop the proposed budget and to get your feedback in work sessions 1 and 2. So I won't go through these, but they have not changed. Our assumptions pretty much the same. So for the general fund, the total revenues and transfers in for next year is $63.2 million. Total expenditures and transfers out is $71 million. We are drawing down the fund balance by $7.8 million for one-time expenditures. One-time expenditures are those that do not recur again. In other words, they're more capital and equipment type expenditures. The fund balance for the general fund is projected to be at $22.6 million at the end of next fiscal year, which is a very healthy fund balance. We are proposing in the proposed budget 15.1 million to be cash funded from CIP, 2.7 million for 28 of those 33 positions that we reviewed with you are from general fund, 1.6 million for new equipment, and 2.52% increase in the TDS for solid waste services.
All right, I have a question. Because it makes me super uncomfortable to see that we're taking out of our savings. And I understand we have a healthy balance. But, so my only concern would be, these are items that don't happen again. But if that happens 3 more years, then our balance will be 0.
We will show you in a minute what the forecast is for the next 5 years. And like Bryan was saying earlier, when we prepared this budget, we didn't just prepare it for 1 year by itself. We're looking down the future, how today's decisions will impact the future budgets of the city. So we package the proposed budgets in such a manner that it does not negatively impact future years for the general fund or for any of our major operating funds. And we'll show you in a minute.
Okay, I mean, I went over all these last night, I looked at them, and that's why I drew my concern. Only because I feel like there's things that maybe could be cut as far as purchases, and mostly being council items where we wouldn't have to draw down any kind of savings. I think those purchases equal well over 20 million, and that would cover the 7.8. So I just wanted to express my concerns regarding that.
So this next slide, we've tried to compress and summarize about, what would you say, about 1,500 budget line items into one slide. So this is a very high-level summary roll-up for the general fund. And I won't go through the details because I've already highlighted what the revenue and expenditures are for next year, but I would like to call your attention to the last 2 lines, and this pretty much will address your question, Councilmember Flores-Cale, that for the general fund, if you look at the second to the last line, under the proposed city manager proposed budget column, we're showing that the fund balance is going to be $5 million more than above what the charter requires. The city charter requires that we shall maintain 25% of our total expenditures in reserve at all times. So that number, that 25% number for next year is $17.7 million. And if you look right above it, our projected fund balance is $22.6 million. In other words, we have 27.6% more money in the fund balance in reserves than what the charter requires. So this is a very healthy balance, very strong financial position for the general fund.
Yeah, and just another point on that, if you look at midway in the expenditures where it says cash funding CIP, that's all one-time CIP projects that are proposed out of the general fund, which is frankly very unique to have the ability to fund that kind of capital out of the general fund. You don't see that in a lot of cities. So about $12 million per year that we have in 23, 24, it's $14 million per year for that particular year that we're proposing to have cash funded capital. So the operating impact on any other programs is minimal. Gives you a lot of flexibility, in my opinion.
Bryan is so glad to be with City of Kyle that he doesn't have to face those challenges like Burleson has.
Yeah. Pervez keeps telling me we're the envy of Texas, so.
I have a quick question. So if we were to make budget amendments, they will come out of this pocket, correct?
Yes,
The savings
unless
that
you identify something else that you want to replace it with.
And as long as we are maintaining the 25% that we are supposed to be keeping, then we should be in a healthy position.
Yeah,
Correct?
that's correct.
Okay.
I just want to make an additional comment about that. It depends on what type of expenditure. If you wanted to add 10 different positions and there's an ongoing impact for those costs, then that's a different kind of question. We'd have to look at the long-term impact. But if it's a one-time capital project or a street or something like that, then it can definitely come out of those funds.
And then one quick question. Let's say that we are projecting, like last year, we had a certain amount of positions that we were trying to get for the city, and those were not filled. Well, those funds will come back to the general fund.
Yes, it rolls into the fund balance.
Okay. Those will go basically into this savings account.
Right, and then we will account for it in the next budget cycle.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to that point, I think it's been, I don't know that we've ever actually achieved 100% capital, like of the budget, actually being able to get those resources deployed. It's a real challenge to have all these projects set up and actually deploy the capital. So it would take a lot of focus and effort in order to actually even deliver all these capital projects.
So just to look at that again, because it's really kind of clever the way they word it, excess of minimum required. So we're really just floating $4 million above the 17 we're required to have.
That's correct.
Right.
And that's not assuming, like the mayor was saying earlier, we may have more sales tax revenues, we may have more property tax revenues over and above what we're projecting, and you may have lower expenditures than what we are projecting. Salary savings, vacancy savings.
The other thing I'd say is, just to reiterate, this is also dropping our tax rate over almost four pennies this particular year, which is a significant change in the tax rate, and you still have a very strong fund balance. And no fee increases, yes, sir. That's right.
So this is the closest, I guess, we've been to the threshold?
No,
a
we've
year
pretty
or
much
two?
hovered around this. That has been one of our selling points when we go before the credit rating agency, that we keep such a strong, healthy balance in reserves. And they give us credit for that. So we get lower interest rates.
I have one last question.
Thank you.
Not that I want to raise taxes, but if we were to not lower our taxes and continue to collect the same amount, would it be helpful to pay any sort of debt that we currently have?
Okay.
You're going to give me those questions, huh? So you could, there's a way to do that where you could defease debt and agree to keep the tax rate currently where it is or not drop it as much, and you would take some of those funds and essentially pay off some of your debt through an escrow account. But there's not any debt currently that's there. You would have to pass an ordinance creating that defeasance program. You'd have to do that before August 24th.
Okay.
So there's a way to do it, but I think we've had extensive discussions about this with our financial advisors and Pervez and I. And, essentially, when we had done the bond program a year ago, we had anticipated that the rates would top out around 59 cents once all of those bonds had been sold. Now, with this rate reduction, we're looking at that rate, that top-end rate being no more than 55 cents. So the range has changed a little bit, and it's all come down significantly.
Okay, but to your point, if the projections based on the debt that we know we're going to have to issue is going to have us top out at 55 cents, wouldn't it be smart for us to create that defeasance program so that we don't have to whipsaw the debt rate so strongly in the coming years?
It's still just a potential. If you look back at the projections that Samco had for the rate for this year, it was going to be 56 cents. So we're 9 cents below the projected rate that was at that time, which is substantial, even with all the debt sales that we have. So it's very possible that we won't have to have those kinds of rate changes going forward in the future. But that's certainly a policy question for the council. If you look at it's artificially raising the rate this year over what's required for the debt, you could do that to try to minimize any kind of fluctuations. But the rate is just it's really a factor of solving for what is the dollars that are needed to pay the debt service.
Right.
And
So if we
you're still raising more dollars.
If we create a defeasance fund essentially, and leave our tax rate the same, and put the dollars in there that keep the rate the same, and then pay our debt down faster, then when we go to issue new debt for new projects, can we use that fund? Can we switch from having it be an advanced defeasance fund to just a regular interest and sinking debt payment?
Yes.
Which
Okay.
doesn't that then create capacity for us if we do it that way?
It could. I mean, the long-term benefit of doing a defeasance for this 1 year would be, it's all the same dollars, but the savings potentially would be a quarter to a half a cent is our projections in a 10 to 15-year scenario by doing the defeasance. It does give you flexibility to do that, but you have that ability. The way I look at it is the voters approved up to 59 cents for the bond program. You have the ability to raise that rate whenever you're needing to raise that rate.
That's what I wanted to ask.
We do, but if we lower it now and have to raise it in the future, I mean, I'm just saying, isn't there a lot of it? Because it's not just about the fact that we would save on interest by doing it this way, which is your quarter half point. It's the capacity that we would be reserving by not going down to 46 cents, but by keeping it at 50 cents.
Oh,
Well,
to
I
have
don't-
that
I
cash
don't-
flow, you mean?
Well, I don't
Lower.
believe the capacity changes because you'd
So,
still be
okay,
able
so
to go back
explain
to
that.
50 cents or 52 cents. It's still the same capacity. If you raised it next year, you still have the same capacity as if you would have kept the rate and then never lowered it because it's the same tax rate that you would have. But it does minimize the fluctuation in the rate if that's a concern for the council
Yeah,
to
so
not
it-
fluctuate the rate.
It's the
But there's no
fluctuation.
financial benefit per se.
Yeah, it's the fluctuation in the rate. It's also the projection to the community, because if we drop it way down, it's much harder to bring it back up. I mean, I've seen that. I've just seen that.
And just to make
Especially
sure
with state
that-
law, it's also extremely hard to bring it
Just so
back
I
up.
understand, when we passed a road bond, there was an agreement that the tax could go up
That's
to
right.
59. So at any point, if we were to, get into any debt, the taxes could potentially go to that.
That's right. That's how it was marketed to the community, of those
Okay.
would be the impacts. And so we believe that range has all come down. And
Okay.
to top end
So-
would be the 55. But it is a question of, if you wanted to try to minimize tax rate fluctuation, you could do a defeasance program to do that, but you're charging more this year than you would otherwise need.
Well,
I just want to be clear about that.
We're paying debt faster.
You would be, but the financial benefit is many years into the future.
Well, but it's just, it's a situation where, at least in my mind, it's much harder to raise the rate. So when you say our capacity doesn't change, if we just go ahead and lower it all the way to 46 and then next year bring it up to 52, then the capacity comes back. But that is a much heavier lift than to just maintain it at the 50 cents that it currently is, because then we have more capacity without having to raise the rate.
I agree. It's the same plan that we had when we did the bond program, though, is what I would tell you is, again, it was supposed to go up 6 cents this year, and we're not recommending that because it's just not necessary. But that would be the same plan, it's just a different version of it. So really, it's the prerogative of the council. If you do want to have less tax rate fluctuation, we want to be clear with you, there's a path to do that, and you could do it if that's something that was important to you, to not drop the rate. I do understand the concern about going back up. This is a way you could do it with the defeasance program. We can come back and show you that.
I have a question. If we kept the rate the same, would we have to take that to the voters?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a point. The reason why we lower the rate is because we go over the threshold that the city's allowed to go over. We go right to where we need to be without taking it to the voters to say, hey, do you guys want us to
Mm-hmm.
raise your taxes? Because sure as the sun comes up, they're going to say no.
Yeah. So hang on, but we need to go back to Perez's yes on that. So yeah, that is a complete changer in terms of.
I
we
mean,
were
it's the
just
whole
told,
reason why we keep the rate
we
the
were just
same or
told
lower
an
it.
ordinance by
So thank you for
August-
interrupting me.
Well, I still had the floor, but we were just told that the August 22nd is when we had to pass an ordinance in order to create a defeasance program to keep the INS rate the same. Are you saying that in order for us to keep the INS rate the same, we have to take it to a vote in November?
Okay, so let's back up. Let me add some clarification to the defeasance option or strategy. let's suppose council wants to maintain the INS rate the same as this year, right? We're at 50.82.
Or maintain the total rate
Right.
at 50 cents.
Whatever defeasance amount is that we come up with, that we have to raise through property tax rates to keep it level, next year, if we don't issue any debt, and the taxable assessed valuations keep rising at the rate they're rising, next year's defeasance number is gonna be twice as big. So we have to be aware of that this is gonna grow if we don't catch up on new debt. Okay, so that's one. Second, the state law says very clearly that if you exceed the voter authorized tax rate, which at this point, what we got last week is 46.93, there's an automatic election required in November for the voters to decide. If they say no, then the law says thou shalt implement the no new revenue tax rate, which is 44.74.
Well, and I think
And I don't know if city attorney wants to add anything to it.
we haven't, Pervez and I haven't had a chance to talk
Yeah,
about
that's
that
just
before
not how it's been
today,
explained to me with the defeasance program.
but what I had heard from the Samco firm is that it would be an instrument and ordinance. Now, that would create basically a debt that would have to be paid through the rate. So we can go back and make sure we're clear. If that's something that you'd like us to do, we can get with the city attorney and Samco and bring that back to you for a discussion, and get clarification to make sure we're giving you the right advice on that.
I was just thinking in different terms, like if we were to keep the same rate and we were to use those funds to either pay some of the debt or add to the general fund to fund other things, but that was basically it.
We can keep increasing the INS rate as much as we want, as much as we can afford. That won't trigger the election. But the M&O rate, if it goes up more than what the tax law allows, then it triggers the election.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I mean, there's two components to the rate. There's the general fund M&O rate, and there's the debt service rate. So I think what Pervez is saying, if I want to make sure I've clarified this, the M&O rate has to fall.
Okay.
And it must fall by state law unless you take it to the voters. But the debt service rate, the law gives you the ability to pay debt that you have.
Meaning bonds.
And so if you have debt or this other instrument, is my understanding on the ordinance that would create the defeasance program, those would all be part of that rate.
Right.
So
So
you would
that's
be
not,
correct.
that doesn't trigger a November election, or at least
That's-
we need to find the answer to that.
I believe
because-
that's true, but but we do need to, if that's a strategy you want to look at, we can bring that back to you and give you all the details to make sure it's clear, because that's not contemplated in this budget.
Okay, so,
We can
and
do it.
the point is that the strategy is, we know, not only are we trying to deploy the money for a road bond program, we've also started down the path of working on a community center. So a community center debt issuance would be in addition to a road bond. So if we use the defeasance strategy to maintain the rate at 50 cents, we create that 4 cents of capacity by basically creating a fund, filling that fund, paying the debt down faster, and then in 2024, it would ultimately be 2025 whenever we go to issue the debt for a community center. We then could transfer that, reduce that defeasance or eliminate that program, and then the debt service backfills it, essentially. It's a way of, the point in the strategy is to create capacity for something like a community center bond in November 2024 going into 2025.
Yeah, it just minimizes the tax rate fluctuation. You don't drop the rate, you keep it where it is. And if the goal is to not have to raise the rate, then that's a strategy that helps you do that. If it's, that would be that'd be the benefit. You don't drop the rate if you feel like you're going to have something coming in the future.
And I do
But
not think that triggers an election, but we need to find out.
I do need to get you, I don't want to give you a legal opinion here. I think we need to make sure we're clear on that. But
I do have a
But I
question
do-
about that.
But if I could just
Yes.
finish one thought real quick. So
Because I haven't had a chance
the,
to talk.
I do want to make sure we're clear about the defeasance going forward. I think Pervez is right that you're going to have this year, and you potentially could have to do that for another 2 or 3 years. of keeping that rate artificially higher than it would need to be. So if you're comfortable with that, it's just something you need to know as a policy, that's where you're keeping the rate, so.
And that leads me to another additional clarification that builds on that concept. There is a concept when it comes to rate making of intergenerational equity. In other words, you have taxpayers that are here today, they're here tomorrow, and they're gone in 2 years. So the question then becomes, this concept applies across the board, tax rates, utility rates, trash rates, whatever kind of rates. The equity question is, should future costs be borne by today's taxpayers, or should they be borne by future taxpayers? That's the equity question. So if I am a resident here, a homeowner in Kyle, Texas, and we increase the tax rate artificially for the next 3 years, but I'm going to sell my home next year, why should I have to pay a higher tax rate today as compared to somebody who's going to benefit in a future year? Why are you making me pay today? So that's the intergenerational equity question that we will have to also consider when this policy decision or discussion takes place. So that's something to keep in mind. Did I muddy it up?
Yvonne, are you gonna ask something?
Yes, I would like to ask
I
a
think these
question.
are all great points.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next question would be, does the increase in the threshold, does that have to be bonds or debt that we currently have? Or can you use future debt, which is not yet created, for this fund that you guys are talking about?
Okay, so the law is very clear. Chapter 26 of the Texas Tax Code. You can only recoup through rates in the INS rates. Remember, there are two rates, M&O, INS. INS is the debt service, principal and interest payments. You can only recoup from next year's tax rate for INS portion what is due next year for principal and interest that are tax-supported debt. In other words, general fund. To make this defeasance happen, the council will have to vote on an ordinance that says we are creating additional debt next year by prepaying principal of our existing debt. So I don't know what the city attorney's opinion is, but the bond council has advised our city financial advisor that this can be done and that they have done it in other cities. So I'm assuming it's okay. So let's assume it's okay. Then the city council, now by adopting that ordinance, you have created an additional debt for next year that can be recouped in the INS tax rate. And if that's what council wants, the INS tax rate can go up, but it will not trigger an election. Make sense?
So if we were to, next year, put on a bond, this community center, that may not trigger, I mean, it will create possibly a tax rate increase for 2025, but since voters already approved an increase to up to 59 cents, but it won't go above that, let's just hypothetically, we can put it on a bond and say it will not create a tax rate increase other than the one that you already approved in 2022?
That's what we believe to be true.
And that's the strategic advantage
We
right
ran
there.
we ran the numbers with Samco, and these are all difficult because you're running 4 or 5 years out. You have to do complex calculations and estimates for all the TERS funds. But we've looked at that pretty carefully over the last few days, and you could do potentially all of the bond programs that have already been issued, so all of the road bonds plus the rest of the park CIP. And we just plugged in, for sake of argument, it is not an engineered number, it is not a number that has been approved by this council, but we put in $80 million for an additional issuance to see, could we do that? And the answer is yes. You could do all of those things and still be below the 59 cents.
Okay.
So that would be an argument. Another argument is to keep the rate higher and not ever try to have an increase over the rate that you have. It's, again, a policy question for you guys to look at. But that's how we tried to approach it. And 80 million is just a planning number. It could be 60 million, it could be 100 million. We just don't know yet. And that'll be up to the council to decide in the future. But I wanted to see, did you have the capacity to do it? Any other-
Can we
No,
make
that's
clear
fine.
that an increase in, if we keep the rate the same, it's still gonna increase how much you pay? So even if we say, okay, we're gonna keep it exactly what it is, homeowners will still pay more. It's not like they're gonna pay the same, they're gonna pay more now.
I mean, what I'm saying is the rate will increase eventually, however, it's an increase that they already approved.
Right, and but this is what I think is important. If we do nothing, it's gonna increase. That's why we lower it down, to kind of keep it to where we're currently paying, is that correct? Perez?
Let's do this. If
I
y'all-
think the
if y'all
problem
don't-
is,
if y'all-
is it,
Not on taxes.
If y'all don't mind, let's get through until we get to the property tax rate section of the presentation, then we can really get into it, because we'll have the slides in front of you. So here's the 5-year forecast for the general fund, and I would like to call your attention to line 14 and 17. Line 14 is the estimated or projected fund balance for the next 5 years. And if you look at the fund balances, it ranges anywhere from $20 million to $31 million over the 5-year period. In every single year, we are projecting we're going to be above the minimum required fund balance by the city charter. Anywhere from 17% to 56% over and above what the charter requires. So here's the revenue and transfers in for the general fund for next year, $63.2 million. How is it broken down? 29% is from property tax revenues, 28% from sales tax revenues, and development fees, 18% or $11.4 million. And then you can see the rest of the sources of revenues for the general fund. On the expenditure side is $70.98 or $71 million. And I'll give you the top 4 where the bulk of the general fund revenues are spent by the city. Police is 25%, $17.8 million. Transfers out to the CIP is 15.8. Also included in the transfer out is the M&O portion of the TERS increment tax revenues. We collect it all in the general fund, and then we transfer out to the individual TERS funds, what belongs to each TERS for the M&O portion. The community development revenues is about 9%, and public works for street maintenance and rehab is 7% or $5 million. And then you have the rest of the city, parks, solid waste, economic development, financial services, administration. So now we're getting into the property tax section of the discussion. The 2023 certified taxable assessed valuations, also commonly referred as the certified tax roll, we received for 2023 totals $5.9 billion as compared to 2022, which was $4.9 billion. So a net increase of $1 billion in taxable assessed valuation. Mind you, these assessed valuations does not include TERS. So I have removed the TERS, taxable assessed valuations from these numbers, so you can see the net number for the city. That $1 billion increase in the taxable assessed valuation is 21%. And in the assumptions we have used for the 5-year forecast, we're using 15% for next year, and then it drops down to 10. But here, as you can see, is 21% for next year. So how does that translate into tax rates? So 2023 property tax rates calculations, certified tax rate calculations that we received from the Hays County Tax Assessor. So here again, the two components of the property tax rates, maintenance and operations, are M&O rate, and then interest and sinking, or the debt service rate, makes up the property tax rate per $100 of taxable assessed valuation. So the current rate is $50.82. Of that, 21.16 is for debt service and 29.66 is for maintenance and operations. The tax rates that we received from the certified tax rates, the no new revenue tax rate, meaning you would get the same amount of tax from the same properties that were on the tax roll last year. Not any new construction or any other additions. Same properties last year to this year. The tax rate for that is 44.74. The voter approval tax rate is 46.93. What the law says is if you exceed 46.93, there's an automatic election in November. Now, if you look at the two components, what we were talking earlier is if the debt service moves from 1901, so let's say 25, the other rate has to drop, right? Mm-hmm. That's the clarification that Bryan was talking about, that we will have to come back after we consult our financial advisor, our city attorney, and bond counsel.
You're saying that if we increase the INS rate through a defeasance program, the M&O rate has to decrease proportionately?
That's what I think.
Okay.
But I may be dead wrong.
Yeah, honestly, we need to look at this, but my thought is that you could do that. You could increase the debt service rate because it would be a legal debt that's required to be paid by the city. But that would have to be an ordinance you would pass, that defeasance program. We will make sure we clarify that for you. It's just something we haven't looked at the law on that. It's a little new for us.
So what will
We
happen?
got this rate Thursday, so.
Yeah, what will happen is, let's say you increase the INS rate to 20 or 25, whatever that might be. The bottom line, 46.93, is going to change, right? That's going to go up higher. So if that happens by itself, if INS is the only rate that moves, then no, there is no election required. But if the M&O increases at the same time as you're increasing INS, yes. So we just have to be careful of, if we're increasing the INS by itself and nothing else moves, we're good.
I have a question, of course. So our current tax rate is 50 cents. To make sure we don't go above the threshold for a vote, they're saying we need to be at 44.74.
No, they're saying at 46.93.
No. I'm just saying without the bonds, without any voter approved. I'm just gonna let me talk and
Go
then
ahead,
and then you
go
can
ahead,
answer me.
go ahead.
Okay, we're currently at 50. The no new rate should be 44.74. Because voters have approved bonds and spending, we can go up to 0.4631. So that's why we go with 0.4631.
Where do you see 4631?
Voter approval tax rate, total property. Oh, you know what? You guys told me. Sorry. So yes, I told myself not to do that. So yes, using those same numbers. Oops, let me go back. All right. So going back, 50 is our current. We're allowed 44, but because there's bonds and other outstanding debt that are approved by the voters, we're allowed to go to 0.4693. Is that correct? I
That's
just want to
correct.
make sure I'm understanding
No,
this right.
you're correct.
Because I see I see all these different rates, and I want to know, and I want council to know how they change and why they're different. But if we decide to go above the 0.4693 and not adjust the M&O rate, meaning maintenance and operations of the city, then we have to take this to a voter. if we decide, okay, we could take away from the city regarding maintenance and operations, then we do not have to go to a vote with the residents.
So I just want to try to clarify a couple things. So the no new revenue rate is a calculation required by the state of Texas, and it basically says for all of the property owners that were out there before, whatever they were paying in terms of dollars, with the increased valuations, what is the rate that would be to where they would pay no new taxes, no new cost for them? So that's a calculated rate saying what that would be. The voter approval rate, this goes back to SB2 a few years ago that changed it. It used to be able to go 8% higher than the no new revenue rate. It used to be called the effective rate. You used to be able to go 8% higher than that. Now SB2 says you can only go 3.5% over that. So that's the difference between the two. One is just a calculation of what's actually going to be a tax increase to existing property owners. So anything over the no new revenue rate is raising more revenue, more dollars from any existing taxpayer, and anything up to the voter approval rate is your ability to do that. So this budget, just to be clear, is proposing 3.5% increase for existing taxpayers that are in the budget. So that's what the voter approval rate is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now it makes sense.
Well, so look, everything that SB2 contemplates, our effective rate, our rollback rate, all of that is the M&O rate. As has been stated many times,
right.
the INS rate is set based on our debt service. It is not subject to rollback, effective rates, no new revenue rates, voter approved rates. It's what is our debt, what is the payment, and how does that calculate out? So that's 0.1901 based on our current debt needs. If we had a higher debt need, that number would be higher and our voter approved rate would be higher, and it would not trigger an election. What the defeasance program does is the voter approved M&O rate of 0.2792 is not touched, which means that we are not talking about triggering an election. What we are doing is we are increasing from 0.1901 to 0.229 to maintain our tax rate at 0.5082. And by doing that, the way you get that is by increasing the amount of debt that we pay next year. It's just that simple. There's no election triggered. There's no alteration to our M&O rate. All we are doing is creating an additional amount of debt that we pay next year in order to bring the 0.901 number up to 0.229 so that our tax rate overall stays the same. It's that simple.
So we increased 0.1% of our,
So the
Rate.
number,
3.5%.
from 0.19 to 0.22, which is 0.1 increase.
so the M&O rate has to come down because of the rollback rate, because of the effective rate, it has to come down. The INS rate, as you can see, does not change because it's not subject to that. The INS rate is set based on the debt we pay every single year. So what we are proposing, or what is being discussed, is to increase the amount of debt that we pay next year and pay an additional amount on principal so that the interest and sinking rate goes from 0.1901 to 0.229 so that our overall tax rate stays the same. And that additional amount of debt that we are paying can be backfilled whenever we issue a new amount of debt in the future years so that we don't have to increase the tax rate when we do increase our debt.
I don't know if there is a possibility or if it's in here somewhere. What I kind of would like to see is to see what can we legally do if we were to maintain the same taxes percentage we have right now. What can we pay with that if it makes sense financially for the city, or if we need to just go down? What will be more beneficial that we can legally do with our taxes? Whether keep it the same or lower it?
Yeah, I think we need to look at that legal, opinion on that, but I think I would agree with the mayor's analysis of that. I think you can, and again, it's a think, it's not a for sure thing. We'll have to get the legal opinion that you can increase that debt service rate. But it will impact what people pay today. Their taxes will be more than what they had paid last year. And so it's that's the policy question for the council. Are you comfortable charging that? We're going to show you, in fact, on the next slide, if you don't mind. Can we just switch to the next slide? This is the average tax bill for homeowners for this current year in 2022 at the proposed rate. So these numbers would shift based on a different proposed, if you increase the tax rate by whatever it was, 3 cents or 4 cents, whatever that number is. So just to be clear, I want to make sure that that policy question is clear for you. It would be charging the taxpayers more than what they're currently being paid,
All right, looking at this.
what they're paying.
Okay, so this is just change in the average home taxable valuation and tax bill. So when I see this, it can be misleading to some people to think that if you own a home for $356,000, that they're just gonna have to pay $1,600 or $1,670, right? But the truth of that matter is, it's an increase of what they currently pay of $1,670. So actually, there's no total amount on here, which I would like to see, because I think at this rate, it would probably be that the homeowner is paying $5,000 to $6,000 a year in taxes.
Well, you'd be looking at overall tax bill to all of the taxing entities. Is that the question?
No, my question is, if I own a home for $356,000, what is my monthly payment towards those taxes?
Your tax bill your monthly payment, your tax bill would be $1,483 under the proposed budget. So that's divided by 12. That's the number for
This is
this.
only the city portion.
This is the
Oh,
city of
okay,
Kyle. We don't
okay.
set the rates and
Yeah,
all
okay.
the.
So
So
I
you're
guess-
looking at all the taxes for all the other entities. That's a different calculation. This is our tax rate that you set.
So,
And this
Okay,
is
again,
this is 22 versus 23, so you can see the difference. The proposal is that the average tax bill for the average home, and again, the average home is changing, is going down. That's what this is showing you.
The average tax bill is going down. Okay.
Right.
Again, my concern is just overall what people are paying. And I understand we can only control the city, but the truth is they're not paying just $1,400 a month. They're paying $5,000 to $6,000 a month. So even if we.
Per year.
Per year. I'm sorry, yeah. Per year. And that's my concern. As a homeowner, as somebody who represents people who have mortgages, I think it's important that we take a look at the overall picture when we decide if we want to increase or keep the taxes the same, as opposed to make it match what we're legally allowed to charge.
I'm good.
But we have to understand what taxes pay for also. So they pay for services, they pay for schools. So
I don't think we were debating that.
I mean, what is the question here? That we don't want to pay taxes?
No.
Property taxes?
I don't think that was the question. The question is, if we were to keep the same rate we have as a city, can we pay anything else additional or increase our capacity? Or we keep it the same? So basically, what they're showing in this chart, which makes sense, is like, if we keep it the same, you know, a house with the same value will pay, I don't know, 17, 15. If we lower it to what we legally have to do, possibly, really what you're gonna pay in decrease is what, 70, 40, $50? So it wouldn't be much. Now, that doesn't mean that the property tax is not gonna increase because of the school bond or something like that. So,
So my quick math on this is if you kept the current rate at 5082 for a home that's now $356,000, and you calculate that across, the tax bill would go from 1483 to about 1600. That's the number, roughly speaking. 1621.62. So that's the difference, the magnitude of that rate. And of course, I would say this too. That's keeping the rate exactly the same. You could end up somewhere in between. You know, if you wanted to be at 48 cents and not go all the way back up, or you wanted to be at 49, it doesn't have to be. It has to be 50.82. But if the strategy is to try to minimize rate fluctuations, that's probably the safest thing to do if you wanted to do that, given all the other things that are planned in the future.
What was it that y'all were proposing to us to balance, to get the budget for this year? Is it the five?
It's the same tax rate as the voter approval tax rate, 4693.
Okay,
But now the discussion is that we're going to come back with a strategy of minimizing the up and down in the tax rate. What will that take for next year? And what I heard was that we would like to keep the tax rate at 5082 or close to it.
And I guess, just from the council's perspective, is that what you'd like us to do, is bring you back that information and how to do that? Is that what I'm getting for the majority?
I would be
Okay,
in favor of that.
okay. Okay. We can do that.
Can you also, when you bring it, can you make sure you have this, because I think this is really helpful? And it just shows, like, it's page 48.
Yep, and that's we'll definitely, we can update that for you, and that's what I was just indicating. Instead of that number being for 2023, the average tax bill being 1483, it would be 1620 thereabouts, something like that. So that's the number.
So before we move on, I'd like to, on slide 31 that's in front of you now, kind of explain agenda item number 2, so because everybody's going to be in a hurry to adjourn when we get done with these slides. So let me just briefly explain to you why that resolution is on the agenda. The tax law requires that the governing body, which is the city council, when a tax rate is set or proposed to be set that the council is considering that is higher than the no revenue tax rate, in our case is 44.74. Any rate that is higher than that, you must take a vote and record your vote that you would consider that proposal at a future meeting. We have to notice, we have to have public hearing, so it just gives us a record vote of if you, as council members, will consider a proposal to increase the tax, because that state law considers anything higher than no revenue tax rate to be an increase in tax rate. So that's agenda number 2 for later today. You've seen this slide. This is our tax rate history slide, so I won't spend time on it. This is the total tax rate in Kyle currently today. We don't know what the other jurisdictions will do, but right now it's total 2.43. The 2 largest components are school district and city of Kyle, and then right behind us is Hays County. This is a new slide for this year. You've seen this slide before. We've done it every budget year. But what we have changed this time around is we've included the 10 benchmark cities. We're now comparing with the 10 benchmark cities. Our current tax rates, the 5082, how does that stack? As you can see, we are number 9 of 12. When you add Kyle to the benchmark cities, we're a total of 11 cities. And in this slide, I've added Crosswinds Mud because they're close to us. And a lot of times you will hear people talk about Crosswind Mud taxes. So this kind of gives you a gauge as to how we compare to the benchmark cities as well as Crosswinds Mud.
You know, what I've always found helpful in this analysis is also to consider the median home value, because the rate is based on the value. And so, for example, Buta's median home value is over $100,000 higher than ours. So if our homes all of a sudden were $100,000 higher, we could lower the tax rate and collect the same amount. So it's good to understand if you put what is the total amount of property taxes per home that the city of Kyle collects, and then benchmark that against the total amount of taxes that, say, for example, Leander or Cedar Park or Georgetown or Buda or Round Rock, which all have significantly higher home values than the city of Kyle, those numbers would change.
Can we get that information? Sorry. go ahead.
like San Marcos collects more retail tax too, so, right? They're able to have a lower,
No, their rate is, in this is actually higher, and the reason is because San Marcos is the one city on this list whose average home value is on par with what ours is. So Buta's home values are just significantly higher, so they don't have to have as high of a rate to collect the same amount of dollars.
That's a good point.
Is there any way we can get that information in the next time so we can see
Sure.
that? Because, I mean, we have to justify to the residents why we rank this high.
Sure, we can give you values, and we can give you average tax bills for all of these, so you can see it.
So, I don't want to go too fast here. So we have a current 50 cents tax rate. If we adopt 2023 at 46.93, which is what y'all are recommending, that satisfies the budget needs, right? Otherwise, y'all would not propose 46.93 for 2023?
Right,
To
so
lower it?
all the things that have been discussed with you in the budget can be paid for with that rate. It just does not take into account that policy question of trying to maintain the rate going forward. It still would have fluctuation going forward in the future with the bond programs that we've talked about. But you can afford everything that's been proposed to you.
And when do we need to make the decision if that's the rate we want to adopt? Is this a today
No,
decision?
no.
No, but you'll adopt the budget by, I believe it's August 24th is the date. So we'll need to quickly bring something back to you so you can have those discussions and decide what you want to do.
We want a different rate, though, if we decide to keep the rate the same. How does that affect the vote that we're going to take today?
The only vote you're gonna take under agenda number item 2 is that you're willing to consider a rate that is higher than the no revenue tax rate.
Okay.
No new revenue tax rate. So it could be what the manager has proposed, it could be keeping the rate the same as current rates, because they're all gonna be higher than the no new revenue tax rate.
And just to be clear, when you make a motion to adopt a rate that's higher than the no new revenue rate, there's very particular language that the state makes you read. And all of you who've seen this in the past, you have to read very particular language that you move to raise taxes by X percent and X dollars, and then that requires that to be read into the record, put in the ordinance, and voted on. So they're real particular. You guys have all seen this if you've been on council for a while. Just want to be clear with you. That's why these rates, they're somewhat archaic to kind of go through how they're calculated and so forth, but that's why they all lead to how you have to actually approve the rates.
Okay, this is sales tax. The projected sales tax is $17.5 million for next year, which is a $1.6 million increase from the current approved budget, or 10.2%. The city's sales tax rate is 1.5%. Most cities have 2%, but in Kyle's case, the other 0.5, the voters authorized to give it to Hays County. Sales tax collection history, you've seen this before. We are trending upwards, and most likely in the next 5 years, it will continue this same trend, if not at a much faster pace, with all the new retail businesses coming into town. So here's a comparison of monthly solid waste or trash rates for residential customers for the benchmark cities. This was one very difficult slide to put together because every city has a very different trash collection program, number of days, size of the carts, recycle program, but we tried to keep it as close as apple to apples for City of Kyle. And based on this comparison, you can see Kyle is closer to the middle, if not slightly. We're number 8 of the 11 cities.
Out of curiosity, who does Buda use? TDS. And they get it for almost $10 cheaper?
Could be the type of service, frequency, those kinds of things. We have 3 different waste streams that are here.
I think they do too.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We can certainly look at some of those to see, what their model is.
Didn't they want to increase this too, like last year after we signed a contract for,
Now they changed their hours.
yeah, I saw
So
that.
they'll be coming an hour earlier.
Okay. The second of the 4 major funds, water utility fund. These will go now real fast. Same assumptions that we talked before. So what's happening in the water utility fund in the proposed year? There's no rate increase for water service rates proposed by the city manager. Total revenues is $17.5 million. Expenditures is about the same, $17.5 million. This includes a $650,000 transfer to the general fund from the water utility fund. No net drawdown of fund balance, $10.1 million in ending fund balance, a very high fund balance. Here again, a healthy fund balance. $21.3 million in planned CIP spending for the water utility projects, $168,000 for 1.8 proposed new positions. The reason is it's in fraction because water and wastewater utilities are split between funds. And then $62,500 for new equipment. Here's a fund summary or proposed budget for next year. Here again, I'd like to draw your attention to line 19 and 20. Line 19 is how much more or above the minimum required. We're 5.7 million over and above what is required to maintain. That's almost 131% more than required. The 5-year window or forecast, I'd like to point your attention to line 19 and 20. If you look across the 5-year projection horizon, every single year, the water utility fund has a positive fund balance and over and above what is required. Here's the revenue and transfers in for water utility fund for next year, $17.5 million. Most of it comes from, or 96% is from water service or water sales. And then we have other fees, a small component of that.
I have a question. The general fund transfer, I've seen this in a lot of the different funds, and I'm just curious what it goes to when it goes to the general fund. Like, what is the need to transfer this out of these individual funds?
You remember when we talked about the fund structure, there is the tax-supported type of funds, and then the business type activities that the city has. Water system, wastewater system, storm drainage, they're very similar to a commercial enterprise. If the water utility in City of Kyle was owned and operated by a profit organization, they would be paying us franchise tax, property tax, and other fees and charges. Since the city owns this utility, the taxpayers, the general fund taxpayers, are the owners of this system. So they're getting a dividend on their investment. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it, they're getting some money in lieu of property tax. So this is a very common practice across all municipalities. Most municipalities have this transfer. When the transfer money, $650,000 from the water utility goes into the general fund, it is applied as a whole, whatever the needs are for the general fund. It is not earmarked for a specific purpose.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. On the expenditure side, $17.5 million just so happens to be right on the money as a revenue stream. The 3 largest components of the expenditure side, water supply is 51% or $9 million. Water operations is 21% or $3.7 million. And then utility billing, where we have the meter reading and billing and collections, is about 8%, $1.5 million. And then you can see the rest that makes up. So now we'll show you how do we compare with our benchmark cities, as well as this is the monthly residential average water bill. Here again, in addition to the benchmark cities, we've added the other utility providers that are within our area. And that happens to be Go Forth, Aqua Texas, County Line, and Southwest Water.
Is that Monarch?
Yes.
Okay.
So
So the 2 highest are Monarch and City of Kyle?
I think the other utilities are just a matter of time to catch up with us because they have to make investments just like we do. But we also don't know from the rates if the general fund is subsidizing their water rates.
The other thing I would say is these are their rates at the time that we pulled them. We're not proposing any rate increases, so all of these could have rate adjustments that are not reflected in this chart. It's always a point in time kind of comparison.
Wastewater utility fund, same assumptions. So the highlights for the wastewater system is this manager's not proposing any rate increase for water service rates, 11.1 million in total revenues and transfers in, 10 million in total expenditures and transfers out. Here again, $650,000 transfer out to the general fund. No net drawdown of fund balance. 9.5 million in estimated ending fund balance for next year, which is a very healthy fund balance here as well. 15 million in planned CIP spending in '24 for wastewater type projects. $197,000 for 2.2 proposed new positions, and $92,500 for new equipment. The fund summary for next year, same thing here. I'd like to draw your attention to line 19 and 20. Line 19 shows you in the CM proposed budget column, we have almost 2.5 million, we have 6.9 million or $7 million over and above what is required to be maintained, almost 300% more than what we need. And you will see that this will come down over time as we're spending more money in the wastewater system. So here's our 5-year forecast. If you would look at line 20 and 21, positive fund balances across the 5-year planning horizon, and the fund balances every single year is over and above what is required. So here's a graphical representation of the total revenues. 98% is from wastewater service revenues, 2% from miscellaneous, and less than 1% for other types of fees that wastewater utility collects. On the expenditure side,
I have a quick
Oh,
question.
sorry.
I'm sorry. And page 66, you may have mentioned this and I didn't hear you. For the approved budget, the 22-23, it says the required minimum is 3.5 million, and we ended up with 1.7 million.
That's excess above, it's really the 5.
oh, the approved budget, you're looking at the approved budget for current year.
But the way to read that is, line 17 is what was the fund balance and what was the required. So we had 5.3, but the required was 3.5, so it's 1.7 more than the requirement.
Okay. Sorry, I was looking at the numbers wrong. Thank you.
So how do we stack compared to other benchmark cities for the average residential wastewater bill? We're right smack in the middle as compared to everybody else. And like Bryan said, we don't know what the other utilities or cities will do with their next year's rates. They may have rate increases or rate decreases. Storm drainage utility fund, same assumptions for customer growth. No increase is proposed for storm drainage fees, 1.9 million in total revenues, 2.3 million in total expenditures. We're drawing down the fund balance by about $370,000. The estimated ending balance next year for storm drainage is $621,000, which for this fund is also a very healthy balance. $500,000 is being planned for spending in CIP from the storm drainage next year, and then $99,864 for one new storm drainage inspector position to be funded next year. We also have $260,000 for new E. coli reduction study, and some new software. Here's the fund summary. And if you would take a look at line 12, 13, and 14, Councilmember Parsley, I'll make sure I don't skip that explanation. So line 12, if you look under the CM proposed budget column, the required minimum balance is 568. And right above it, you'll see what the actual proposed estimated balance is, 620. So it's $53,000 more than or above what is required. The 5-year planning horizon, or the 5-year financial forecast, if you see look at line 12 across the board, it is more than the required minimum fund balance every single year. Total revenues for next year is $1.9 million. 53% comes from commercial drainage fees and 47% from residential drainage fees. And then we have less than 1% from miscellaneous type revenues. So how do we spend the money that comes into the drainage utility fund? 46% is for operations and maintenance, 32% for staffing, public works, and 1 position in the engineering department, and then 22% or $500,000 is going to go towards CIP project next year. So now we're going to get into TERS 1 and 2. TERS number 1, the city and county, we both participate at 100% in tax increment revenues. Next year it's projected that TERS 1 will have $2.6 million in increment revenues, $1.8 million in total expenditures. For TERS 1, there are no administrative or maintenance expenditures proposed next year. The only expenditure is debt service or principal and interest payment back to the bondholders, and that is the $1.8 million in 2024. Here's the proposed budget for next year. If you look at the city manager proposed budget column, $2.6 million in revenues, $1.8 million in expenditures, and these are all debt service related expenditures, principal and interest. We have $810,000 less in expenditures than revenues. That adds to the fund balance. The fund balance is projected to be slightly over $1 million for next year for TERS number 1. Here's the 5-year forecast for TERS number 1. If you look at the last line, as debt service decreases over time, the fund balance is growing because the expenditures are pretty much limited to debt service in TERS number 1. So the fund balance is projected anywhere from $1 million next year to $8.4 million in year number 5.
I have a question. Money that was paid into this by the general fund, will that be refunded back to the city?
So that's a very much a policy decision. The past council nor the current council has given direction to staff to repay that money. There was no agreement at the time. It was the obligation of the general fund. If there's any shortage in meeting the bondholder requirements, it was made up from general fund each year in the past. If council wishes us or gives direction to the city manager, we can implement that policy.
Okay. I just would like to be consistent across the board.
So, but in the next year's budget or in the 5-year planning horizon, we have not assumed any repayment back to general fund from TERS number 1.
Thank you.
How much do you, I guess, estimate would be coming back to this general fund from TERS 1? That hasn't been repaid.
Don't hold me to it. I'll give you round numbers. The last time I looked at it was a couple of years ago. It was close to $10 million.
How do we go about that, Brian? I mean, I get the
Is this for 1626, the funds that were allocated? It's a policy question for the council. I think it's not been contemplated that this fund would ever pay back those dollars at this point. It has been for TERS 2 for the parks, but if you wanted to do that, then you would have to look at adding some kind of line item here to have a repayment schedule.
I don't think we would be able to do that without either way, we're gonna have to reconstitute the TERS 1 board. The TERS 1 board was, I don't even know if it was ever constituted initially because it was, the revenues were simply to pay the debt service. But this is the first series where the revenues in TERS 1 exceeds the debt service. So I think it's gonna need to come forward probably pretty soon to reconstitute the TERS board and have a discussion about what to do with future revenues that are in excess of the debt service.
Okay, I have a question about that then. If the TERS boards haven't been meeting for TERS 1, how has there been spending?
Because the founding documents of the TERS requires the general fund to pay the debt service on 1626 and the TERS revenues to backfill that debt service.
So there's no approval needed from a TERS board?
You don't have to, yeah, it's just an automatic thing. But now the revenues are in excess, and so there's funds that are unallocated. And so now there's a reason to reconstitute the board to decide how to spend those dollars or what to do with them.
Okay, so maybe I'm asking the wrong question. The state statute says that there's a board that oversees this TERS. So when spending is done, who's overseeing that spending?
Well, I don't know the last time the board met, but at some time they met and there was an action that was taken of how this was going to be done. And I think that's what the mayor is referencing, is that there was a funding stream set up, but for many years, all it did was provide funding for that stream. And you can see in 22-23, that is the first time where you've had, or that's the first time you've had these excess funds that have been identified, but they're projected to grow. And so if the use changes, to change the use, you would have to go back and have that board meet to do that. I don't know, but I suspect they met some years ago and established that and created those, costs and liabilities for the fund, and that's how it was done. We could go back and I'd have to research that. I don't know if Rivez has those documents again. It's been
No, that's
before my time.
That's pretty much how it happened. The board decided and voted on that they will assume this liability, the debt, for the 1626 construction, design and construction, and that the TERS would hereby approves payment of future principal and interest.
So they don't have to approve the invoices individually if they're a large amount? So who oversees to make sure that that's not getting overspent?
The city is and the bond trustee is.
Oh, so the city staff is?
Yes.
Overlooking it? So the board is not required by the state?
Well, we're not increasing the debt. The debt is still the same as we're paying off, the debt is coming down. So the obligation of the city and the TERS has not changed. So we have not added any new types of expenditures. We have not added any maintenance costs. The only thing this TERS pays is the existing debt that the TERS board approved to take on and obligated itself to pay in the future.
So just to amplify that point a little bit, if you look on this slide and the total expenditures, those are all just P&I, principal and interest payments related to the debt. That's all that's included in the expenditures. When we go to TERS 2, you're going to see debt plus other things that are in there, the repayment back to the general fund, maintenance costs, those kinds of things that are there. This one is very different than that one. So, but I do think it's, the mayor said, and I think Councilmember Flores-Kell is, given that the situation is changing, we probably need to take a look at that and come back and have a discussion with the board about what's the future look like for this fund. Does that make sense?
Well, if the money that now we're getting in profit there isn't coming, it is coming back to the general fund, even on its own.
No.
Then where is it going?
It's
TERS.
staying in the TERS
But
fund
it's not
as
being
long as,
reinvested in the TERS either,
as long as TERS is alive,
right?
it stays within the TERS.
But what is it doing there if we're no longer increasing maintenance expenses or operating expenses?
That's the question.
But that's what I'm saying, so why would we just leave money growing there.
This is just the first year that we're actually having money.
Yeah, it turned about in 2019, so we never had this.
Right, no, it's great, it's a
And
great problem,
flexibility,
you know, it's a
yeah.
great problem that now money is arriving, but what I'm saying is, if we just say do nothing, and we walk away and we have no action on this, that pile just keeps growing.
No, I agree. I mean, and we're certainly not saying do nothing, but if you look at the current year estimate for 22, 23, we're estimating this year will end with 275,000, but it does grow to 8.4 million by year 5. So it's a great discussion to come back to the board to say, where do these funds go? How do you want to reinvest it? What's the purpose of it? But it just hasn't been a point in the past where I think you've had significant dollars to really have that conversation. But I do think, you know, $8.4 million is a lot of money potentially over the next 5 years. It's a forecast, but it could be a lot.
Thank you.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah,
Okay.
it helps to kind of think about it as we move forward with more of the talks.
So moving on to TERS number 2. This is TERS number 2 is over in the Plum Creek area. In TERS 2, the city and the county participates at a 50% rate in the increment revenues, meaning 50% of the tax revenues captured within the TERS boundaries stays within the TERS. The other 50% goes back to the taxing jurisdictions. So the general fund gets 50% of the tax increment within TERS number 2. Total revenues projected for next year is $2.4 million. We're estimating that TERS number 2 will issue $15.3 million in new TERS bonds. They will be repaid solely by the revenues of the TERS number 2. Expenditures estimated for next year, $14.6 million. What makes up that? $161,000 is for operations and maintenance. This is the upkeep and landscaping type expenses. There are no administrative overhead costs. $400,000 for annual repayment to the general fund. This is the repayment schedule, paying back the general fund on the cost funded upfront by the general fund for the 2 parks, La Verde and Heroes Memorial. $507,000 for debt service in fiscal year 2024. If you recall, TERS number 2 issued $8.2 million in TERS revenue bonds, so that's the debt service on that.
I have a question.
$8 million, go ahead.
For the TERS 2, I sent an email regarding about water usage. How much money did we pay for water usage? And how are we tracking that for the pond and the landscaping?
So the parks are maintained by the city's Parks Department. The city has had a long-standing policy that it would not move money from the left pocket to the right pocket. So we don't bill ourselves for the use of the water. But there is a accounting for how much water is being pushed through those meters out there. So if the question is how much TERS 2 has paid the general fund or the water utility fund for water, we have not billed ourselves or collected ourselves.
How much has the city spent?
Now, we'll have to work with Public Works to figure out which pot of water they use to send to, because we have 5 different sources of water. Guadalupe, GBRA, Edwards, Barton Springs, San Marcos, and then we have our own well water. So we'll have to average those costs, the cost, and then figure out what the dollar tag is. Not the retail cost, but the cost to the city for that volume of water.
Okay, so if we have an amount, say it was 200,000 gallons, could we find a price, or are all the prices different for the different water entities?
And they're very different, and they're based on per acre foot, so we'll have to figure that out and average that out. And we can provide that
Okay.
information.
All right, thank you.
It'll just take a little time to calculate, and I couldn't get to it because I was trying to get ready for this.
No, I totally understand. Thank you.
So $4.5 million for design and engineering for 3 traffic roundabouts, one at Cromwell, one at Benner, one at Sanders. The city engineer gave me this pointer to the best way to remember this is CBS, because I always kept forgetting which intersection we were talking about. So he said, just remember CBS, Cromwell, Benner, Sanders. $1 million is estimated for design and construction of a temporary parking lot in TERS number 2 next year. And here's the fund summary for TERS number 2. And like we've done before in the other funds, I'd like to call your attention to the last line, which is the fund balance. In next year's, we're estimating that the fund balance will be around $13 million, but most of it is from bond proceeds. So if you look in the revenue section, line 3, we are planning to issue $15.3 million in TERS revenue bonds. And that on the expenditure side, you will see the roundabouts, $4.5 million, and $8 million in retail roads. So that leaves you a net balance of $13 million. Now it's clear in the 5-year window forecast how that bond proceed is being used. So if you look at line 3, $8 million in 22-23 that we issued for the retail roads. $15.3 million is planned to be issued next year, and that's for roundabouts. And then another $10 million is planned to be issued in year 25-26, year number 3, and that is for a planned parking garage in TERS number 2. And if you look at the 5-year forecast, every year there's a positive fund balance, and the city's general fund is being repaid. If you look at line number 12, next year is $400,000, in year number 2 is $440,000. It increases as the TERS cash availability improves each year. So it goes from $250,000 in the current year to $400,000 next year, and then it keeps increasing each year to about $600,000 in year number 5.
So I have a question. 2 questions. So has there been any talks with the retail developments to pay back for those retail roads?
Pay back for the retail roads with, that were issued with the bond funds? Was that what
Yeah,
your
so
question?
my question is, we don't go to Walmart and build their roads. So my assumption is if the city wants to pay for it, is there some kind of like payback? What will they be reimbursing the city?
No, the concept
We've
is,
got to be factually accurate. You've asked this question multiple times.
Yeah, and I still do not understand.
The $8 million retail roads that we are constructing is in exchange for $8 million in value that we are receiving back in the form of dedicated land and obligations that we have to the developers that are being waived. So we are not building their roads. We are trading them $8 million in roads for $8 million in value.
And we received that land already and deeded in our name?
We have voted on exactly the mechanism for how those lands are to be dedicated, and they are obligated to convey within certain periods. We also haven't built their roads.
Right, so my question is, when will we receive that land?
It's in the agreement that we voted on.
So we don't know.
You have to
Okay.
go, no.
So, okay, going back to my other question.
You don't know, but it was
No,
in the
you're right, I
agreement
don't.
that we
That is
voted on.
exactly what I'm trying to figure
It's also been
out.
sent over in a memo from legal explaining exactly when the land is being conveyed to the day.
Right,
It's in your emails.
yeah, so we don't know. You don't know, I don't know. Fair enough. Thank you.
may need to be on my page. If you need to, you can come down to the podium.
Paige Sign, City Attorney for the record. The land for the underlying roads has been conveyed to the city already.
Okay.
The soccer parcel will be conveyed by September 12th. The other properties are going to be, the deeds are going to be placed in escrow by September 12th. They'll be released to the city when the city commences construction of the roads. And then there's a waiver of impact fee credits. The developer has a impact fee credit that they could draw on that the city would be obligated to pay. And the developer is agreeing to not draw on that for a period of 18 months. And then once the city commences construction of the roads, then that impact fee credit is forgiven.
Do we know how much that is?
It's over $1 million. I don't have the exact number.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So my other question is, I know you don't want to, you said you didn't want to intermix TERS funds with general funds, but when we do CIPs and they receive, any TERS receives money for a CIP, is there a reason why we don't put that in their budget or show like money in and money out?
We do not commingle any fund.
So we don't commingle funds, but we do commingle projects.
No, we don't.
Well,
So-
CIPs are both city and TERS.
So we'll show you in a minute. When we plan the 5-year CIP spending plan, each project is identified with a funding source. So all these projects for TERS number 2, they have dedicated funding sources, whether they're TERS bonds, cash-funded projects. Right here, you can see clearly that TERS 2 is borrowing money, TERS bonds, and building these projects. There is a temporary parking lot that we're able to pay cash for that $1 million temporary parking lot. There is a repayment schedule to pay back the money that was borrowed from general fund. Each year you see a transfer out going back to general fund to repay for La Verde Park and for Heroes Memorial Park. So there is really no commingling. It is very clearly identified, each project and the funding source.
Okay, so then that budgeting isn't the last. So for example, for a TERS to get $20 million, it would have to show a transfer in, correct?
Oh, yes, we show
okay.
every single year the general fund sent money to TERS number 2. Council voted on it.
Okay.
And on the flip side, the TERS 2 showed money coming in from general fund that council voted on.
Thank you.
Okay, so speaking of CIP, what does the 5-year CIP look like? We're almost there. So the 5-year spending plan that covers fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2028 has 141 projects. It totals $682.6 million. Of that, 68% is funded that we know of today. That equals $467 million. And $216 million is unfunded at this point, or 32%. At the bottom of the screen, we've added to show you how that $682 million is planned for each one of those 5 fiscal years. It ranges from $176.6 million in 24 to about 116 in 2028. These projects are planned projects. These are just a planning spending plan. They will move in and out of each fiscal year as we move forward. So you will see the 176 may become 150 because there were delays or design or acquisition delays, whatever the case may be. These are not firm numbers. These are just estimates projected for the next 5 years. So this goes back to your question, Councilmember Flores-Cale. That total $682 million 5-year CIP plan Where's the money coming from? General fund, 75 million. If you look across each year, you'll see how much general fund is cash funding capital improvement projects. Park Development Fund, $7.1 million. Water Utility Fund, 2.5. Wastewater, water impact fee, 42.6. Wastewater Utility Fund, 2.7. Wastewater impact fee fund, 45.1. Storm drainage, 2.5. Street rehabilitation fund, 7 million. TERS number 2, $34.4 million. These are all TERS monies that TERS plans to issue debt. We just a few slides back, we showed you what the plan, TERS bonding plan is. Transportation fund, this was a question earlier on, what are we spending? The reason it showed 0 on the fund structure, because there is no expenditure planned in 24, but there is 2.6 in 25 and 6.6 in 27. ARPA grant is 12 million. TxDOT grant, if we get it, is 43.5 million. 2008 GEO bond, 1.4. 2020 GEO bond is 8.9. Only half of that is 8.9 is city's GEO fund. Then it is dollar for dollar matched by county's matching bonds, another 8.9. Number 16, 278.9 is from 2022 GEO bond. These are primarily, almost all of it, for road bond program. Future CO bond fund, this is for the city's wastewater treatment plant expansion projects. We have not issued this debt. We will come to council for authorization, but on the next council meeting agenda, there is a reimbursement resolution that you will be asked to approve that basically says, go ahead and spend the money now, and then when we issue the debt, we'll reimburse the city funds where the money was borrowed. So there will be 2 items related to the treatment plant expansion project. One is Leon's. He is requesting council's authorization to approve a design contract for the expansion, and then the city's bond council will bring forward a reimbursement resolution. So that's the breakdown of the 682 million or 683 million 5-year spending plan of how it's going to be funded. So here are some highlights. Not all 141 projects I'm going to go over, just top 35 real quick. And these are all of special interest to council. These are all based on council priorities, so we've highlighted these. Downtown redevelopment program, we have 10.5 million in the 5-year window. Community center multipurpose facility, 1.3 million. Go Forth Road reconstruction from Caseta Ranch Roundabout to BB, 1.1. Heidenreich Road reconstruction, 1.2. Street rehabilitation program that Public Works will carry, 5 million. Street microsurfacing, 2.5. Daisy Lane illumination project, 1 million. Traffic control improvements, 7 million. Kohler's Crossing illumination, 1.3 million. These are all in the 5-year window, so just because they're here doesn't mean they're on next year's window. They can move in and out. Kohler's Crossing rehab, 2 million. Property acquisition program, 10 million over the 5-year window. Property acquisition for future park development, 4 million. Fire station property acquisition renovation. This is a placeholder project. 13.4 and 10 million is unfunded at this point. Citywide beautification program, $5 million. Festive lighting in city parks, $1 million. Regional sportsplex, 50% of this is going to be paid by Hays County, 14 million. They're coming from bonds. Plum Creek Trail improvements, here again, 50% will be matched by county, 3.8 million. A bike, this is a brand new bike BMX park, 1 million. Parking lot, 5 different parking lot improvements at 5 different parks, 2 million. And various other improvements throughout city parks. TERS number 2, as we discussed, is $34.3 million over the 5-year window. As you can see, $1 million is from cash. The rest is going to be borrowed from TERS revenue bonds. 2022 road bond is anticipated in the 5-year window to spend about $279 million. Additional lane on I-35 southbound frontage road, $2.9 million. Water system improvements, $45 million. Cash, $32. Borrowed, $12.9. Wastewater treatment plant expansion from 4.5 MGD to 9 MGD is $101 million, and most likely this is going to be a CO bond issue. Wastewater system improvements is 47.7. Right now, we think we can pay 32 with existing cash in the 5-year window, and another 15 million would have to be borrowed. Number 27 is the demolition of the old police department building right across the parking lot here, $1.3 million. Number 28.
Well, and just to be clear, it's not 1.3 million to demolish, that's the amount left over
That's
from
right.
the original bond. Just in case.
That's correct, yeah.
That was gonna be my question. Like, what does it mean?
Go ahead.
It's in the bond column, okay.
Well, this is the monies that were included at one point to renovate that facility. At one point, we were looking at changing the use of the facility, and the direction the council has been to demolish that building, which I would expect to be 100,000 or so, would be the kind of the cost to demolish it. Likely, we need to do an asbestos check and all those kinds of things that go with it. But then that funding would then be available to do something different in downtown. But that's just essentially taking the dollars that were there to renovate the building and saying, we're going to demolish it.
Number 28, this is the next 3 projects are TxDOT grant application that's pending. Vibe Trail is 13.8 million. The FM 150 shared use path from Lehman to Highway 21 is 21 million. FM 1626 pedestrian overpass at the railroad crossing is 8.5 million. East Side retail infrastructure plan, this is the one that city manager talked about earlier. Goforth Road design at the Wiegand track, 2 million. East Side retail infrastructure plan, water line design, Wiegand track is $1 million. East Side retail infrastructure plan for wastewater line, Wiegand track is another $1 million. Wastewater treatment plant beautification, $75,000 is in next year's budget. Waterleaf Park irrigation improvements, $75,000 is included in next year's budget. Rainwater collection barrel program is included in the operating budget for $25,000. And that's the end of the CIP. You can't talk CIP without talking bonds.
So, whoa. Can we add, sorry, I know, these are the requests. So could we look at maybe adding money into CIP for more purple pipe to save on some of this water usage as we're moving forward?
We can certainly look at that. There are restrictions about how to do it, and I think Harper and I have had those conversations. I know in Waterleaf, the question was, hey, you're right next to the treatment plant. Can't you just put some of the effluent out there? There's some technical challenges. It can, of course, anything can be done, but I'll ask Harper to comment on that a little bit more.
Oh, you're exactly right. So right now we can't, just like the pond over there at Heroes Memorial, we can't do that. Number one, it's a detention pond. That's what they advise us going to the stormwater, but also the level of treatment that we do right now at the plant, we can't place that anywhere. The only place that TCQ has allowed us to is the golf course, and that's at the late hours of the night when more likely there's going to be no human people out there walking around and stuff that can get possibly into it. So as we move forward and we get to tertiary 1 treatment, that allows us to do a lot more, possibly irrigate with that on a regular basis, but we're just not at that point yet.
I have a question. Are you done?
Yeah, go ahead. 'Cause I was thinking.
I know at some point we discussed like the purple pipe a couple of months ago, and I know you mentioned that there was some document gonna come back for us to review. And part of the issue that we were having was connectivity in order to be able to extend the purple pipe to the rest of the city.
So there's a lot of purple pipe that's been put in, and Leon's been instrumental in getting that in each of the projects. What we lack right now, we have different, let's say veins. We have different veins out there right now. We don't have a central hub. We don't have a pump station. We don't have things that can actually push this out. And then the interconnectivity between this central hub and these veins, we need to connect these two dots and run those pipes. So a lot of that hasn't been done.
So how are we giving water to the golf course?
The golf course is an existing line that was there back when. So when they first built the plant, when Aqua Texas was contracted to build that plant, and they built a line as well, all the way from the plant to the golf course as a way to get rid of some of the effluent. So that was already there through Aqua Texas and a dealing with the city.
So in order for us to have a purple pipe hub, what would we need to do if we are sending water to them? I was just wondering if we can just attach from that and just build from there.
There's a study right now that we're getting, that we're got back or getting back, Leon?
I think that's the one
effluent
that
study, yeah.
we talked about that
Yes.
I would like to see it and see what needs to be done, 'cause I think that's a huge priority right now.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree with you.
Would that include the price of if we went the hub route, or is it only if we try to plug and play?
I don't remember if that has the price, it gives the, but does it give costs and everything? Is it that detailed, Leon? Do you remember?
Mayor and council, we expect to get a report, a finished report from Cobb Finley. They're the engineer that's been assigned to do this project. We've been going back and forth with them with comments, and we've asked them to wrap up the report so we can have a presentation to council, hopefully within a month or so.
So we won't be
Yeah,
able to add any of that to the budget.
The costs that I've seen are very significant for their plan. It includes even that 8-inch line that we have there today. They're proposing to make that an 18-inch line.
Yeah, that's what I was
So it's
assuming.
going to be a fairly large cost involved. They've broken it up into phases. They've recommended some phases in how we should implement the master plan. And so we'll bring you all those details hopefully within a month or so, if not sooner.
I would really like to see that. That should be on the top of the CIP for like wastewater, in my opinion.
The dilemma that we have is that we don't have all the pieces connected. For example, there's one project that I haven't even pushed out for design yet, from Lehman back to a junction there on that main water line, or wastewater line we're trying to upgrade. That section's not in, so that section will come with that. What we've been trying to do as we build these new wastewater lines, we're including purple pipe in those lines.
Okay, but
So
do
all the
we
pieces aren't
have-
there.
Do we have like a master plan for purple pipe? Is that
We
what
do.
is coming to
We
us?
do, yes. This is a
Okay.
master plan, yes.
All right.
Yeah, and like what would it take to push the purple pipe from the golf course to the regional sportsplex site? Because we're going to have soccer fields and things like that. So the use would be the same. We're talking about irrigating lines, and I know we've just put purple pipe underneath Kohler's, but I get various talking points. You know, I never know exactly where we're at, and I would love for us to make a very affirmative decision about putting that purple pipe all the way up to where the regional sportsplex goes, so that we can water that in a healthy way without having to use potable water. And we're on a 2-3 year horizon for having that park constructed. So we should be on a 2 or 3 year horizon to get that purple pipe all the way up to the sportsplex. And not just the sportsplex, there's additional potential uses for effluent water in that region. So I just don't know where we're at. I just want to echo what's being said here, is that's a very, very high priority for us to at least know what our actual situation is and what decisions can we make to expedite that.
I think we're on a time clock. That's kind
Yes.
of what we're looking at.
I'd just like to add, it does take 8 million gallons of water to maintain, irrigate the Heroes Memorial. So if we can find a way to reuse that purple pipe reclaimed water there, we're
That's-
saving.
And
That's
there are
amazing. Yeah.
purple pipes already in the landscaping infrastructure. We just got to plug it in and
Can't
turn it
get-
on.
Can't
No,
get
no, I
clean.
think it has to be affluent. Yeah, you can't do that.
No, you can't,
Oh, you can't
you
do it
can't
there.
fill the tank
Right.
with the water, but you can irrigate the
That's what we
landscaping
want
with
to
the
do.
water.
That cuts half of it
Yes.
down.
It does.
But we can't right now because the veins aren't, they're not connected. There's no connection there yet. And
That's,
there's
that's
nothing.
what I just said. Yes, you
nor
gotta
is there-
plug it in.
Right, there's nothing to pump it, nor is there defined storage yet. So
Right.
those things have to be all determined through this study.
So that study, because I spoke with you by the time that we spoke about the roads, that was probably about 4 or 5 months ago. And back then, I thought that the study was gonna come back next month. So who do we need to push to get that, like, next week?
Jesus.
I don't know if I can do it
It's not
next
gonna
week,
happen.
but I'll definitely work with Leon to see what we could do to expedite it. And even if we don't have the final study, if there's some information that we can have to try to put together, here's at least
Who
a
is doing
basic
it,
plan.
though? Is it the
Cobb
city?
Finley? No, it's
Oh.
an outside engineering firm.
Oh, can we push it? What's the email?
We're waiting for the final report to come in. We've already told them we need to get the final report ready. We actually had a slide presentation we worked on and
Okay.
shared it with them to show them this is kind of what we'd like to see. So we'll be trying to clean that up.
And what
get it
what
out to you.
what I mean is, like, I would like to get something in the budget for us to start working on it, like,
I understand.
next year.
Okay.
And Mayor and Council, don't forget that we awarded a federal earmark from Doggett's office for $2 million for Purple Pipe. And we are going through, they assigned it, I believe, to EPA. And we are working through the EPA process to get that money officially in our hands. So we would have some funding to do some of these projects.
One last thing I think is important to point out right now, just in case if it hits later. Tim's pushing on a regular basis, the majority that he can to try to fulfill the Plum Creek Golf Course contract. They have a certain allotted amount that we have to provide them daily. He's pushing regularly as much as he can in these times, but it is a drought time. So he's pushing as much as he can to them to fulfill that contract. So that study comes in and we have certain things lined out. We may still have to, well, we will still have to build that line from the plant, a larger line that right now there's not room with the easement. So additional easement, I would think, is going to have to be done. That means you have to go to every property on the way. I just want everyone to understand we're talking about some time here to get all that in order. But once that happens, yes, we'll have a great product. Okay.
Well, and in regards to the sports complex, most of those complexes use artificial grass. They don't use real grass if you go up to, the Westlake area and up north. So hopefully that doesn't deter it, is my whole point to that, is let's not make that contingent on the sportsplex, because I think we really need that sportsplex.
Just want a plan. Yeah, I agree with you. I want us to not, I don't want it to be something in the back of the mind, like we need to know what we're doing with this, because a lot of us are planning on being able to deliver, a sportsplex, for example, and there are definitely going to hopefully be artificial fields, but there'll probably be grass fields and grass components as well. And there's going to be some kind of watering component. We don't want to get you can't allow for those kind of facilities to be on the same schedule as a drought plan, because then you let your fields die, and it's not good. And so we're installing that purple pipe, but we just don't know what the plan is and how we're going to deliver it and how we're going to fund it. And that's why we keep bringing it up,
Right.
We need the plan.
That's why I said that. That's why I wanted to make everyone aware. And when the study comes back, they may have a temporary solution for right now. But the overall plan is a larger pipe coming from the plant.
But to Councilmember Parsley's point, that overall plan is not in our CIP. It's not in our this year or our 5-year or our 10-year. It's not. It doesn't exist.
Yeah,
We want to get that on the books so that we can march forward and deliver it.
That's what Leon said. He's been waiting for them to provide it. I know he's reached out to them in the past. I can't speak for that firm.
What I can do is get with this firm, see where we are with this report, and try to put some at least preliminary numbers together for you, and then potentially we could amend the budget to include those items to have it in.
Okay, I have a few questions. Oh, go ahead.
And then the Uber voucher program, I think it's important that we do deliver more transportation options to people that are limited, have some walkability or transportation problems. And even 20 vouchers a month, and not everybody's going to use them. I think that it would be a great thing to do for the residents who need some kind of walkability around the vibe or whatever their situation is.
Yes, sir. We put together some basic numbers on the cost of increasing the number of rides. To go to 20 rides per month is approximately $90,000. To go to 30 rides per month is approximately $180,000. So if the council's interested in doing that, again, going back to Pervez's comments before, you'd need 4 of you to ask for an amendment to
So
that.
I'm asking for the 4 council members to support 20 rides a month.
What does give you that number?
He gave me the number.
Is that what most residents are asking for?
He did it based on population.
Well, you asked me for the cost. I
Right,
gave
so
you
we
the,
have
I
10
gave you
now.
the cost.
Right now, they get 10, right?
So
up to
I've got a
10.
couple numbers on it. So right now, 76% of our users do not max out 10 rides per month.
Right.
So it's a small portion who use it in that way, but they're using it to commute regularly to jobs and things like that. So that's the number of people that are going to be impacted by increasing the allotment. Basically, what we're saying is for those who are relying on it, we're going to increase it to a total of 20 or 30 or really whatever that number needs to be. That's the proposal. But the other part of that is, did we increase the budget this year? Because we got real close to hitting the budget. And if we see the trends line continue, are we going to still be within our budgeted amount? Or are we going to run out of money just in general?
We've increased the amount in next year's budget to 300,000 from 230,000. We're also tracking.
But did you base that on the actual trends? Or because the way I'm reading the trends, that it's going to be higher than that. This will be the first year that we
I
run
think it
out.
will be higher than that, and the trends are going up partly because of ridership, but also the increased cost for the ADA program. And Pervez and Bryan and I are tracking that. Right now, we'll probably need to bring a budget amendment back to you for this year and reanalyze next year's budget to see how that tracks as well.
I would think it makes more sense for those users that are commuting constantly to come to the city and request for additional vouchers instead of just doing an amendment to put 20 rides for the residents that are not using it.
I agree. I think we have a real transportation problem, and it's only gonna affect all the retail that's going in, because I think our hope is to get maybe high school age kids to be able to work in these retail jobs that we bring, to include all the new restaurants we have. I don't know, I know when I was 17, I couldn't spend $6.28 a day to get to and from work to make sure that I was on time. I also don't think I think 18, you have to be 18 years old to have an account. So can a 17-year-old get an account for an Uber? Probably not. 16? Probably not. So who is going to be the workforce that drives all this retail that we're bringing in? And is Uber going to be the long-term solution that we want, instead of having a real transportation plan where someone can buy some kind of pass, whether that be a bus, a trolley, or a subway, or a horse, I don't care what it is, something that's feasible that our residents can use long-term and not be dependent on something such as an Uber.
I'm glad you brought that point up, because that's something that I kept bringing up before. What's going to be our long-term city transportation plan? You know, we can give out vouchers all day long,
Right.
but again, how long will this Uber program continue to last? So we have to look long-term as far as we're continuing to go 5 years, 10 years down the road. There could be discussions in the next coming years where we would need to really start looking at a city-wide transportation plan.
Well, all I would say to that is give me one piece of evidence that there's a program out there that will get people from point to point more efficiently for cheaper, and I would be open. Because right now, our average cost that we're having to subsidize is $11 per ride, and that's 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. It's the most efficient, growing, widely public adopted, and beloved program that we've put together in regards to transportation period. I mean, there just has not been anything even come close.
For
So while it
adults.
might say, oh, that if you're 17, you can't get an
16,
Uber,
15.
16, whatever that number is, fine. I guess that's a valid point. But this program is being adopted, and we're not even promoting it. I don't think there's been a single Uber post or promotion all year long from the city's social network, maybe one. It's not something we're heavily, it's organically growing. And again, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, point to point, $11 subsidized rides, a $300,000 program. Well, how much does one bus cost? What, are you going to have one bus trying to run 1,500 people all over town? I mean, there's like 1,500 people a month that are using this program, and it's just being highly, highly adopted. So you got to back up the claim that this isn't the long-term solution, because every single statistical element of this program is blowing the competition away and is infinitely more affordable and efficient than any other program that could be out there. So I'm just asking for something. We should be celebrating this program. It's very, very effective.
Well, I would like to see the information that you just claimed. So you're asking us to prove to you that this isn't working. And I think it's great for adults that want to drink and not drive. And I think it's great for adults that want to get to the airport. But for the majority of our residents who do not use transportation in that way, I don't think it benefits them. I don't think it benefits the majority as a whole. So if you're going to claim that you would like to see numbers on how it's not cost effective, or I would like to see what you're saying as far as how it positively affects the majority of our residents instead of the minority, because I think the numbers were relatively low. How many people used it?
We're at 1,500 rides per month.
Okay, I get that. 1,500. I'll give you 2,000 a month, right? You go to any city such as San Marcos or anywhere else, and you tell me how many people take the bus, how many rides there are overall a day. I promise you, it probably far exceeds the 1,500 we're doing a month. So my whole point being, there is a need for transportation within our city, not just to get to the grocery store to get milk, but to staff these businesses that the city is pushing to bring in to make our residents happy.
And just like anything else when it comes to consumer, you want to give people options. That's really what I'm looking at as well, is you're giving people, not everybody's going to use Uber. Uber's a great program, yes. But from a city point, if there's a master plan later on, because again, we'll be 100,000 people before you know it. And is Uber going to be the only thing we're going to have available to get from place to place? It's looking long-term, ladies and gentlemen, the way I'm looking at it.
I think those are good things for us to be planning, not right now, though. I mean, this is not the meeting to do that. We definitely should have a workshop about what the future of our transportation is going to look like.
I would just offer that as we move forward with our strategic planning next year, that we can add that into our strategic planning.
I agree.
I think that anything that involves money or budget decisions, of course, is appropriate for a budget workshop. That's what this is. That's the definition of what budgeting is. You
Yeah.
set aside money, you talk about the needs, you hear from what the residents tell you. Now, I was just suggesting 20 to be generous to residents. If everybody doesn't want to use them or use that many, that's perfectly fine. But there are many people, residents here, and we're a growing city, who do not have the ability to get from east-west or wherever around the city. So
Yeah, you are right. It is a budgeting question. So the question of whether or not we want to limit the 25% of riders who use 10 rides every month is a question. But also, if the trend lines are showing, if there's a particular budget amount that we can forecast to fully fund the program, why are we not fully funding the program in the budget? That's a really important question. Because if we're going to find ourselves 6 months in and we're out of money, this is the time to make that adjustment, not to plan for 6 months. We're going to have to amend the budget because we know with 100% certainty that we are underfunding it because of the trend lines.
Well, I would just say that, we know what the program criteria is, the 10 rides, I think it's 2 rides to the airport per month, something like that. We'll fully fund that. It may not be in that line item, but in the appropriations that you give us, we'll have the ability to make adjustments to fund that to the criteria that you have. If you want to change the program and you want to have that budget discussion of how much more you want to add for that, That's a discussion.
No, what I'm
we'd have.
saying is, based on the increase in demand for the current program and the trends that are going, that have been almost like linear in terms of how the program has been growing, 300,000 is not going to cover next year's amount. It's
Do we
more
have a
like
projection of
430.
that, of what that number would be?
We're working on that with our Uber contractor. When we first came up with $300,000, it was at the beginning of the budget process, and we've seen those increases the last 3 or 4 months. So the linear trajectory has changed, but we can use the numbers that we have and bring forth a more accurate projection for next year based on the criteria council gives us on maximum numbers of rides.
I have a quick question. Do we get to know where are the most common places people ride to?
Yeah, I have that data.
Because I think that will be important to see if it's within like Kyle. And then maybe we can use that information for next year workshop and seeing where really people are
Right,
needed
the
to.
Uber 314 base program is limited to Cal City limits in some
Mm-hmm.
areas just outside. The primary destinations are typically the shopping centers, Walmart, H-E-B, Target. But
Then what I was saying is like maybe we can do a workshop so we can get next year's budget, like 2024, 2025, a program that will target these places and maybe see if it's what's cost effective. Maybe doing a trolley that goes to specific points within the city, or if we need to stick to Uber. That's what I was trying to tell you.
So to address the issues that Councilmember Zuniga is bringing up, is there a way that we can adjust the app and make a request for additional ones? So that way we're not increasing them overall, but they can increase them per the person? Is there something that we can do along those lines? Because I don't want to limit it.
Well,
but
we
I also-
can, but the reality is, we already, the data is there, that three-quarters of the people don't max it out currently. So this is because of the large number of people that use this program, statistically, you can define exactly what the cost is and how many people are likely to take advantage of a program. So the simplest way is, as Councilmember Zuniga said, just increase the monthly allotment. But you're really only increasing it for those who are already maxing it out. The others use it for, singular trips. I used Uber 314 last night, but I've never once come close to maxing it out. My monthly average is maybe 3 times a month. But there's a group of people, roughly a quarter of them, who use it much more frequently, but they just max out, and then that option, that benefit is just going away. So there's statistical reports that you can run to determine exactly what your exposure would be, and then how many people would benefit from increasing the total amount of vouchers. And so it's just not that complicated. But I'm in complete agreement with increasing it because it will make a significant impact on the people who rely on the program the most. In particular, those who are trying to work and don't have transportation to work and are coming to our major employment centers and power centers to work. That's what that proposal to increase the total allotment of vouchers would target and would impact.
Well, my concern would be, like, increasing it for everybody is going to take away money from the general fund that may not get used, which I think we've seen as an issue before in certain
But that's not how you
departments.
budget it. You don't budget it assuming everyone's
it
going
will
to
go
ride
back.
30 times. We have enough data now to be able to target within a very narrow window exactly how much.
Can you
it's
bring
gonna
that data back,
impact
Brian?
us.
And we can look at that?
Well, that's the estimate that we provided. $90,000 is our rough estimate of how many people would use it. It's based on what the mayor's saying. It's the segment of people that are hitting max, the 10. Some of those are going to go all the way up to 20. Some will only hit 15 or 16. So it's hard for us to give, complete accurate information, but that would be our best estimate, is about 90 grand.
So
for 20 rides.
what you propose is what Mayor Mitchell's talked about.
It's based on looking at just the segment that's hitting the cap, because the others, you would assume, well, they're still not going to hit the cap because they haven't hit it in the past, so additional rides are of no interest to them, really. But
Conceptually, it's like we're reallocating unused vouchers to those who will max out on a monthly basis.
Well,
it's more money, yes, but it's some, if you said for everyone in the, that's in the program, you have 10, the ones that didn't use all 10, yes, they're being reallocated to another group, but it is going to cost you more.
Yeah, the payment is based on rides, not vouchers.
Right.
So we're not prepaying though?
No.
No.
Yeah,
No, no,
so
no.
that's what I'm saying, is that we're if right now we're paying for 500
No,
arbitrarily, but only 300 get used, what happens?
No, it's not the way it's worked.
No, there's no cost to issue a voucher. The only time we pay money, and that's actually the beauty of the program, is you only pay when somebody actually takes a ride.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So what's the problem? I mean, like the mayor, why are we defeating a program that seems to work? If we're only paying for a ride.
We're not defeating the program. Nowhere in there did I say, or any of us say, defeat the program. It's a great program, people use it, but it's also looking at options later on down the road as we grow as a city. There could be other options we could look at.
I'd like to keep
Great
it the
for
same.
everybody.
I don't want to increase it. I'm
Yeah,
okay with
use
the way it is.
Jerry,
Not everybody uses it.
did you mention to me a while back something about Uber dabbling in some public transportation, some more mass transit solutions?
No.
I don't think
Or
so.
was it, okay.
Well, but the question of future programs and, bus service and all of that is taking away from the question of, do we want in this next year to increase the allocation of rides to allow for those who are hitting the cap to have the ability to use the program more and commute? That's the question that's before us, that's a budgeting question. So.
What would the ask be hypothetically, go from 300,000 budgeted?
Well, to increase the
what?
number of vouchers from 10 to 30, which is where it really needs to be, to allow for people, that's a total of 15 round trips, or roughly 20 working days. You assume maybe you wouldn't be, still wouldn't get someone 20 working days, but it would get them 15 working days to and from. And I think the cost on going to 30 would be like 180 grand or something like that.
Right.
So,
How much did we pay last year?
180 grand more in the program.
So we're
Yes.
thinking it would go roughly from somewhere around 300,000 is what we're paying. Maybe that estimate needs to be a little bit higher, but 300 to 580, or 480, excuse me.
Yeah, because you have to count in increases in the ADA program, which is very expensive. So to get up to 20 rides would be pushing us close to the $500,000 mark, which would be another 200,000 on top of our already budgeted 300,000.
I will tell you, and I know this is probably a future discussion too, but that is a fraction of what you would spend on a bus service. A bus itself would be several $100,000, just one.
Yeah, you're not going to ever make a profit in a transportation
That's right.
system. That it's a post office, it's a police, it's a fire department. These are resources for our residents. They are not a way to make money. And
Who's
that's the
making
bottom
that
line.
argument?
Well, we were just talking about how much something is going to cost. So this will always cost the city a large amount of money, with the return on in investment being making our residents' lives happier. So ultimately, it doesn't matter what we spend.
Right, but if you're talking about $11 per ride, variable cost structure. This is not about profit, it's about using your dollars wisely. It's a variable cost system, which means that we pay as the service is being used. A bus service is, number one, a bus isn't coming to your house. You have to go to a pickup location, and it's only running certain periods of time. But to have a true bus service throughout the city of Kyle, where you can really have reliable transportation close to your home, is a multi-million-dollar proposal that's not within our ability to fund at this time. What we do have the ability to fund, which again, I don't know why I'm having to defend this, is 24 hours a day, point to point, for $11 per ride. So by just increasing by a couple $100,000, we're giving people the ability to have a bus service at their house, taking them to work and back home, and they have to wait 10 minutes and it picks them up at their door. It's a very, very good program. And so do we want to allow for people to use this program as a workforce model, which is what public transportation is, and all it's going to cost is 180 grand in order to deliver that value to our residents.
So I wouldn't be opposed to go up, but I want to see the average where people are going. If it's just to services like Walmart or H-E-B or pharmacy, stuff like that, if that's how it's being utilized, then I wouldn't have issues increasing it.
Yeah, I can produce a heat map that shows destinations and where people are coming from, and we'll put that in the next Friday report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
All right, I do have a few questions on some of these projects that we have, just for clarification. So my first question is going to be the community center facility project. What is that?
What page are you on? I'm sorry.
Page 90, number 2.
Did you-
Oh, okay. So after the visioning session, the CIP program, a project was added for a multi-purpose facility in the future. This is a placeholder project until council decides what they want to do, whether they're going to cash fund it, bond fund it, go to the voters.
Okay.
But until then, $1.3 million has been set aside to at least look at options for location, concept drawings, those kinds of groundwork.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
that's all that is.
Number 11 and number 12, when will we have a discussion and a vote for those 2 items?
Well, that's part of the budget. So it's August 24th. You'll be asked to vote on this as a capital program, to have in here for this capital program. The property acquisition is really the same that you've always had, $2 million a year. So this is over a 5-year period, so it's the same that you've always had. And the property acquisition for the future park development, that came out of the visioning session also from the council to include funds for that, for a site yet to be identified. But that's based on council direction, so this will be asked, you'll be asked to vote on this program as part of the budget process.
Okay,
And then
but
individual
we do have
project-
specific retail or specific buildings that the city is looking to buy. So when are we going to receive those appraisals?
Well, each of those will come forward individually. As projects are identified, they'll come forward, and you'll be asked to consider those individually as they come. But this is just funding for citywide property acquisition potentially.
I
going
understand that,
forward.
but my point is, how did we come up with 10 million and $4 million?
10 million is the same dollars that you've always had, $2 million per year to have
I
property
don't know if that's
acquisition.
always, but
It's been in the last budget.
I think last year was 1.2. And I don't even know if we had it the year before, but that's okay.
It has gone up over the years.
These are the
It hasn't always
numbers,
been that.
well,
2 million is an increase of $800,000 this year. Right, but, right, I understand that, but here's the deal. When you make such a statement, my assumption is that you know.
well, I do know, and I'll be clear that this is the information that we showed you in the visioning session. We showed you how much was there per year. I don't recall what it was the last few years, but 2 million is exactly what we showed you in the visioning session over each year. So it's the same as what's been shown to you in the past.
Okay, at the vision workshop. And I'm going to make clear that I did not argue, I did not discuss, because I knew that some of this was going to come to the council. And so that was not a discussion for me to have in a meeting where no minutes were being accurately taken, nor was it televised. So I want to make that clear with everybody that I was not trying to have that conversation. My next question is the fire station property acquisition. Do we have confirmation that the fire department is going to sell their building?
No.
Okay, so we're going to set aside $23 million, and we're not, like, when do we plan on finding out?
I think this is an ongoing conversation. Prior to me getting here a couple of months ago, I think the council's had conversations on that. I don't think the fire department is ready to have a final decision, is my understanding of that issue. This is not for next year, but in the 5-year plan, the funding is there. If that were to occur, that you have the ability to fund it. If it does not occur, or you don't want to proceed with that, then that funding could be reallocated.
Okay, and then number 16, the regional sports complex. How is that going to be different, like, than the rec center?
I don't have the information on the Sportplex. That might be a question. Mariana, do you mind providing some details on that? Or I don't know if we have enough mics down there.
Mariana Espinosa, Parks and Recreation Director. So the Kyle Regional Sportsplex is part of the park bond that was approved in 2020. And that is different from the proposed recreation facility. I was not at the council visionary retreat, so I don't have the details on that. But the difference is the Kyle Regional Sportsplex includes both outdoor and indoor sports amenities, whereas I believe the vision for the indoor recreation center is a more of a traditional community facility that could house intergenerational programming and events.
Okay. So ultimately, the goal of the city is to have a regional sportsplex and a rec center?
I believe that's what we've been
And the city's
talking
going to pay for
about.
both?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Oh, wait, one more question. For the number 36, the rainwater collection, when are we going to receive information based on what that's going to look like?
That's coming for the next few meetings.
Okay.
I'm looking at a lot of these columns, and there are sections for property acquisition and also for, is that the one I saw? Yeah, future park developments. I was wondering, could we set, because last year we moved some money that was dedicated over for the parks to be able to look for new park areas. Maybe we could put that back this year. That was, what, 500K? That was moved over for the splash pad, but I think it might be good to maybe have that back, so if
We spent
park.
that money.
Right, we spent it, but
Well, there's
would it
in
be
the,
good to have that back strategically?
so there's several park improvement items in here. So one is the property acquisition, so that's 4 million. That's a part of the program. Then I thought there was, what was it, 2 million for general park improvements?
Parking lot improvement.
Parking lot improvements for 2 million. That was for 5.
But something where we can
There's
set
also,
aside for more parkland.
there's money proposed in the budget for
Yeah,
us to
various
lease.
improvements at City Park, item number 20, it's 2.1 million. So there's still money allocated for us to improve parks over time.
Okay, because I wouldn't want to miss out on that, whatever opportunities or parklands were
Yeah.
looked for with that money.
We have La Vista Park, right, that's the land that's right over there by Chapa. Okay, so there, it's just a matter of identifying the certain areas of what we're gonna look at, the population and so forth, is the way I would look at that on that.
So just to clarify, that $2.1 million, is it allocated to any certain park? Okay. I think that if you just explain that could be spent anywhere. So instead of the 500,000 you think is a good idea, they're doing 2.1 million.
So for this slide, we lumped it together, but when you go to the CIP spending plan, you will see each park identified specifically and what year and how much. And Mariana, if you'd like to add some, if you want to.
That was pretty exactly what I was going to say. So for example, as you're seeing, like this year's budget and in the future proposed budgets, each park had about $10,000 in park improvement money. And we did ask for an increase in that annually. That includes signage, that includes ball field, sand and gravel, fencing, trash cans, bleachers, benches, just ongoing items that over time do need improvements. And so that's why we've asked Pervez to keep that money allotted in every year for the budget.
And I sent an email a couple weeks ago about the pool, getting some AstroTurf over in that area. I don't know if that could be, if that's within this budget or if it could be allotted to that.
Yes, ma'am. So on the identified list of Greg Clark Park possible improvements, we did add that to that list.
Okay. I don't know if anybody's been to the city pool. There's a whole area that's just like chipped woods from where trees were. And I thought it would be a really good area so you could go and not cut your feet as you walk on it. So,
I think that may have been one of the original plans when those trees were gonna come down. It's just a matter of
doing it.
strategically getting it all done on that end. We did get the mural up, so that's nice.
Yes.
I'm good with that. Item 20 was, I guess that's what I missed. We're good.
So the last two topics, outstanding bond debt and new fees. So here's a chart real briefly. We have long-term debt that are supported by these 5 funding sources. This does not include any bonds issued by PIDs. The PID debt is PID's debt, and they do not show up on city's balance sheet. So what we are projecting at the end of this fiscal year, property tax supported debt will be $110.2 million, water utility 2.2, wastewater 27.3, TERS number 1 11.7, TERS number 2 8.3. So combined with everybody, all the funding sources, we are projecting $159.7 million after paying principal and interest. This fiscal year will be the principal balance at the end of the current fiscal year. Moving on to the next year, same funding sources. It is projected that the principal balance outstanding at 9/30/2024 will be $205.9 million. And that's because primarily, if you look at property tax source, the engineers are forecasting that they will need us to issue $25 million for road bonds. We don't think, based on the cash position we have in that fund, that a bond issue would be necessary next fiscal year. However, we wanted to show council what the engineers are saying, that they will be spending over and above what we have already given them from the 2020 bond issue. Water utility is not anticipated to issue any new debt. Wastewater utility will issue debt. This is for the expansion. So as we proceed with that project, debt will be issued over time, not all in one time, the entire $100 million. TERS number 1 is not issuing any debt. It is paying off debt. That's why you see a decrease. TERS number 2 will issue debt over the next 12 months, or plan to issue, so their balance will be about 13.9. So the net change between 9/30/23 and 9/30/24 will be an addition of $46.2 million in outstanding principal.
I have another quick question.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Hey, sorry for just jumping in. Brian, when I think I sent you email, maybe what other cities were doing, a road impact fee. Did we ever get any more information on maybe considering creating a new fee?
A street impact fee, is that
Something,
the question?
I think that's kind of how you worded a street impact, something that would be maybe a one-time fee, but it could help repair some of our older roads as more and more developments come in.
Yeah, typically the street impact fees are going to be assessed like a water impact fee or a wastewater impact fee. When a business comes in, or a home, they pay a proportional share of the cost of the improvements that are required to service that area. But for older roads or older infrastructure, that's not necessarily going to be the case.
Right.
It would really be for new growth that's coming in. Anyway, that's how I've seen those in the past. But we could certainly look at having a street impact fee discussion. I don't know if that's been had here in the past.
Well, City of College does have a adjacent lane mile fee.
Adjacent lane, so similar.
Similar in nature.
That a developer will pay. And it helps to.
Yeah, and Will is back there. He can add more to it.
Sure.
Yep. Just to be consistent, as we're growing and other cities are growing, if they had these other fees that maybe we might not have, that we could collect?
Will Atkinson, Director of Planning for the record. As Mr. Langley and Profez have both mentioned, we do have the adjacent lane mile fee, and it is assessed at time of development. So for example, a single-family neighborhood, each residential unit would pay a little over $1,200. So let's say you have a 100-unit subdivision coming in. So you're looking at around a $120,000 paid. And so depending on the amount of value that they provide, they either make the improvements or they pay the fee, depending on the scale of the project.
And the fee goes into which account fund?
Street rehab fund. We have a separate fund, dedicated fund.
But isn't this one that you had a zero in?
No,
Price
that
too
was the
small to round
transportation.
up?
That was transportation.
So what is the fund that was collected?
If you,
What's the number
okay,
collected last?
let me have Andy call it up real quick. Can I see it? Can't read it.
It should be, the number should be in the budget.
It is in the budget, it's in your backup. It's not on the slide, but if you look at the CIP, let me go back to the CIP.
And this helps to maintain our older street paving and street sidewalk stuff.
Mostly street improvements, sir. I believe typically Public Works puts together a plan of what streets need to be addressed the most that are existing, and then they go from there, depending on the amount of funding in that line item.
Street rehab, okay, there it is.
So on slide 88, item number 8, street rehab fund, we're showing we're going to spend $7 million out of that fund over the next 5 years. And you can see each year what is planned.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we have that mechanism. All right.
It's just, you know, in relationship to some of the other costs that you have, it's fairly small. $1 million a year is significant, but it's, you know, a street could be $20, $30 million, depending on what it is.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Will.
Yes, sir.
It's my pleasure.
So we're on the last item, at least for the budget, before I turn it back to city manager. There are 8 new fees being proposed, and very briefly, number 1, temporary certificate of occupancy fee in the building inspection department. The fee amount is $750 per 30 days. Number 2, a pool rental add-on fee. This is, I suppose, when volleyball and basketball nets are rented, $45. Number 3, construction inspection fee has 3 tiers, base fee of $5,000, 1.5% per acre for review, which is $900 per acre, then a 2% for inspection, which is $1,200 per acre. Number 4 is a tree replacement fee by the planning department. It's $300 per caliper inch, up to a maximum of $2,000 per single-family dwelling. Number 5 is a development agreement fee. This has 3 components: base fee of $3,000, a deposit of $15,000 for legal review, and if there are any amendments to the development agreement, it'll be $1,500 per amendment. Number 6 is from our Public Works Department, backflow prevention assembly tester, or BPAT, annual registration fee, which is $100 per year. Number 7 is a backflow assembly testing fee, $40 per test. And the last one is a meter technician's trip charge. This is when home builder schedules a new water meter installation and the technician shows up and the meter box is not ready for meter installation. So this is to recoup our time and equipment money spent on that wasted trip. And that's it.
Well, I have one concern about the amendments to development agreements. Oftentimes, it's the city making the amendments. So I just want to make sure, in the event the city makes an amendment, that they're not going to charge the developer. Like, how do we specify, how do we make sure that happens? Otherwise, we could just amend it all the time and just collect a bunch of money.
Yeah, similar line of questioning is just, you know, if a developer wishes to amend or propose an amendment, if they pay $1,500, does that guarantee that that amendment has to come before the city council? And so that's a different sort of workflow. I mean, I think the way it currently is they make a proposal and then staff considers it and decides whether they want to bring that amendment forward or not. When you put a fee into it, yes, it's a cost to the developer, but it also empowers the developer. It gives them an avenue to make that request. Most of the time, the amendments that are coming forward with a lot of staff.
I think there's two different things. If someone said conceptually, we'd like to talk about this amendment and here's the discussion and kind of what it would look like, that can just be a discussion. But if it's, we want to engage your city attorneys to draft specific language, to amend a specific section or sections of the agreement, to draft it, and us spend time and cost on it, then that's what the fee would be for. But if it's really just a discussion of conceptually, would you do this? Well, that's a different, I think that's
Regardless
something-
of approval?
Right. A conceptual discussion could be, we want to talk about this, and we could say whether we'd support it or not. There's not a fee associated with that discussion. But if it's, we want you to draft something specifically, and there's a cost to it. We just want to make sure we don't incur costs that are not paid for by the developer, because sometimes development agreements aren't approved, or they don't have support from the council for whatever reason, but we spent significant resources on it. So that's the idea.
Well, I see what Mayor Mitchell's saying, because I don't want the developers to think just because they pay this fee that it's going to pass, but it's going to be for consideration.
Sure.
So maybe we can have them sign something stating, we understand that we're paying this fee. This does not guarantee us approval.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there are other fees in the development process where they're paying a fee to go through zoning process or whatever it is. There's no guarantee associated with that either, but it's a cost recovery item for the city.
But do those usually come to the council?
Many of them do. For zoning cases, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of situations where a developer wants to amend the agreement, but staff doesn't support it, and there's no one on council to sponsor the item because there's no one who's motivated to do that either. Does this provide them an avenue to force everyone's hand to take up our time in a council meeting where we have to hear the proposed amendment and deliberate and then vote on it, all because they paid $1,500 and nobody is supporting it? Historically, it just wouldn't come forward, is what I'm saying. And so I'm thinking that because there's a financial component to it now, they're going to want to compel the council to take up their item.
I think that, the negotiations are similar in, zoning. So typically developers don't want to bring forward anything that staff's not going to support. So ultimately, it does come down to they work to get something in front of council that staff will support and recommend. I know that really doesn't answer your question.
I mean, I support it overall.
Paige has a comment. I'm sorry. I see her trying to get everyone's attention back there. It's not working. At least I can.
Paige Sines, City Attorney for the record. I think that if they would not, I think there should be an application connected with the fee, but they wouldn't be prompted to submit the application until staff has given an indication that the amendment is supported by staff. And so there would be no mechanism for them to pay the fee until that has occurred. And so there'd be the initial consultation with staff, and then if staff is supportive of an amendment, then the developer would be invited to make the application so that the agreement could be drafted. And the application can contain the disclaimer language that there is no guarantee of approval by council.
I would think of it like special use permit. You could request to have a special use permit, and part of that is a consultation with the planning department, and you'd know, is the planning department going to support that or not? And they could decide, at that point whether they wanted to proceed or not. But there's probably a lot of other cases like that with planning.
The PID application, we have a fee for a PID, and we don't bring forward PIDs until, like Paige said, that staff is supportive of it, and we don't usually have them go through the application process until we've indicated that we're supportive of it and ready to bring it to y'all.
So were these fees that are new never collected before?
These are new.
Uh-huh. So I guess there would be losses just in going to inspect the buildings? I mean, all last year?
Yes,
Free-
sir.
We were just
Which-
spending our time.
Which fee is that, sir?
Well, like the master tech trip and I guess the construction inspection.
So the meter tech trip charge, so the cost is already there. We have our staff. There's no new cost for the staff that's there. But the point is if they go to the home site, the developers requested, the home builders requested us to come out there, and for whatever reason it's not ready, then
Right.
this would help us recoup some of the costs that we already have. It's a cost recovery item.
Okay.
But there's no new cost. It's already, all these costs are already embedded in the budget. It's an attempt to try to recover some costs from them.
Well, I see that with everything but the tree replacement fee. I
Yeah.
don't necessarily understand the logic of that, because in our landscaping ordinance, we require if you take of certain type, if you remove a particular caliper tree, you are required to replace that tree with an equally, with a certain number of calipers of trees. But that's still so there's a cost associated with that on the developer's side but why is there a $300 per tree charge to the city? I don't understand what costs we're trying to recuperate with that fee.
Will Atkinson, Director of Planning for the record. With our current landscape ordinance, we actually don't have a per caliper inch fee for replacement costs. Typically, what we've been working with developers is approximately $150 per caliper inch. But that number can go up and go down based on the market, and it's also kind of based on we're receiving information from the developers. So we looked at the City of Alamo Heights ordinance, and they charge, I want to say, about $300 per tree as a replacement cost. But then they also have a cap when it comes to single family and duplex development of $2,000 per residence, because they wanted to break it out between commercial and smaller residential. We don't want to overburden residents, but if a big development comes in and says we want to remove all these trees, and at first we don't want to do that, I'll say that, but we want to have an appropriate amount of fee that is a little bit, makes them think, if you will.
But I guess I just don't understand why we are charging a fee. Like having a policy that says you can't cut down certain types of trees of certain caliper, or if you do, you have to replace that tree within your project with equally valuable trees that will grow up over time. That's all in our ordinance, and that all makes sense, and that's a cost to the developer to make sure that they're considering the trees within their project. Why are we saying you have to pay us essentially? I mean, a tree costs $300 per caliper.
Yes.
So not only do you have to pay for the tree, you have to pay twice over for the tree. You have to pay $300 per caliper to install the tree, and in the form of a fee to the city, an additional $300.
So we only charge the fee whenever they run out of room on that site to replace the tree. So for example, if they can only fit 50 extra replacement trees and there's still a balance that they can't put on site, typically we want the remaining value in a fee perspective, so we can provide it to the Parks Department so they can plant future trees and maintenance.
So they're not replacing all of the trees, is what he's saying. And in the event the site development can't hold all those trees that they need to replace, they want $300.
Per caliber inch.
That's clarifying. Thank you.
So, council, we have, of the $270 million budget, we have covered 95% of the budget, and this one slide will cover the last part. These are all other city funds that we did not cover. That's in your backup. There are detailed line item budget for every single fund. I've listed some examples of these funds. You've got debt service fund, hotel occupancy fund, park development fund, so you can look at specific details for each one of those funds. And as a reminder, next August 15th, budget work session number 4 at 7 p.m. We have public hearing on budget and tax rates, and the first reading on the adoption of property tax rate and budget ordinances. Thursday, August 24th is budget session number 5 at 6 p.m. Public hearing on budget and tax rates, and the second reading on adoption of property tax rate and budget ordinances. With that, I'm going to hand it back to City Manager.
So 102 slides for a presentation. It's a record that should never be broken, right? But it's a lot of information. We do appreciate your patience and understanding as we try to walk through this. It's very complicated, a lot of different pieces. I think our takeaways that I recall from the discussion, I know we've talked about a lot of things, but would certainly be this discussion about stabilizing the tax rate, the defeasance program. We talked about that as a group, so we'll bring that back to you. Also bring you back a plan on the reuse water plan that we have for the wastewater system. We'll talk some more about that, of how to bring that back. Are there any other things that you want to have in this budget that you consider for amendments to the budget? If you have any of those, we need direction from you of what you'd like. We can then bring them back for you for additional discussion. Otherwise, the city manager's budget, proposed budget as I've presented to you, will go forward through the process.
So I have one.
Yes, sir.
It's a proposal to remove or reallocate the fire station $13.4 million to the downtown of some other kind.
Okay.
Basically, I think there was 10.5 million.
Yes, sir.
It's a catch-all. I'm not saying we're making a proposal, but it seems to me that program there is dead, and there's a lot of money in that.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense in my view to keep those dollars there.
We could certainly consolidate that with the downtown redevelopment program and just make it one line item.
And that's consistent with what you've been proposing.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it will require an amendment, though, as Professor.
What page is it on?
I believe that's on page 90 is the downtown development program, and page 91 is the fire station acquisition. So essentially, you'd be asking to combine those two line items, 1 and 13. Is that correct?
To call it like downtown redevelopment?
All downtown redevelopment program, so that would read.
So I'd like to make a motion to amend the proposed budget to eliminate item 13 on the 5-year CIP plan, which is the fire station property acquisition, and to reallocate those dollars to number 1, downtown redevelopment program.
Second.
All right, motion by the mayor, seconded by Councilman Flores Kale. Is there discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries
I had it
7-0.
already crossed in here.
Right.
Exactly. That's all I've got.
Any others? Sir?
Can we just make sure that we get the information for both Uber and, I think there was one other thing that we wanted, the rain barrel harvesting, to just make sure that we have the correct information?
The rain barrel program, I know it's important to Councilmember Heiser. I'm working on that. I'll be bringing that back in Mr. Zuniga. So we'll bring that back. I think we have that scheduled for the 15th, if I recall, to come back. What is the information that you need from the Uber program?
I think me and
We
Councilmember,
wanted to know
where the money was,
Oh, the locations?
whether or not we
Okay.
should, yeah, we just want justification and
Okay,
increase
we
in
can
that.
include that in a future Friday report.
I must have, maybe I missed it, but that 100,000 that we had earmarked for a future mental health program, is that still in
Yes,
there?
sir. That's in there. I'd have to go back and find exactly where it is, but yes, sir, we did have that in there. Yes, sir.
I have a question about the rain barrels. Is there anything that we put, because I remember talking to maybe Will a long time ago about that. Is there anything that we can put in our landscaping ordinance where we will maybe incentivize, propose, or anything like we could request from at least commercial new developments to have it installed?
We're going to try to give you an overview of the program. Essentially, to make it work for residential properties, it's frankly very expensive to pipe it in from the downspouts of your house into a rain barrel, and then to try to put it into some kind of irrigation system that you can actually use. And the size of the barrels are really, 100 gallons or 200 gallons is really a de minimis amount, and you'd have all this infrastructure and cost for really just a few minutes on your irrigation system. And when you need the water, it's going to be in the summertime when it's not raining, so it doesn't really help you.
Yeah.
So we don't think it makes a lot of sense on residential properties, although some people may want to do it because of the environmental impact. They just may have a reason, even though the financials don't work, they want to do it. There may be some opportunities on commercial properties. We're trying to look at that to see if larger properties would work. But we're doing that analysis, and that's what we'd like to bring back to you on the 15th.
Okay, because I saw
It's not as easy as you
the new
think.
gas station has what it looks like a rain barrel outside.
And sometimes those are decorative
And
features.
I was wondering if that was just decorative, which is fine. I just thought, okay, if one can do it, then maybe more gas, that's all.
I think sometimes did you have something, Amber?
It's not decorative. It actually is a working
Oh, it
rain
is?
barrel, yeah.
Okay.
I guess eventually when you rain.
So, yeah, some places they are decorative.
Can we also get like an idea of what the dog park at Waterleaf would look like? I just want to make sure if we put something up there that it's going to be not just a fence, but maybe something with.
Well, is that something you want in context of the budget, or do you just want us, when we bring the project forward, to give you the project plan?
Well, I think we need one for the other, right? So is $75,000 enough? Or can we make it more? Because everybody that I talked to, and I did ask people, they said they wanted a shaded area, they want seating. So if we're gonna do a dog park, I wanna just make sure that we do it right and that people really get the full enjoyment out of it. There's nothing fun when you're living in the state of Texas and you're outside with your dog and it's hot and you don't wanna really be there, but if we can make it enjoyable and relaxing, I think that's something I can get behind.
Okay.
I guess we can wait for, I would love to see the proposal. If there is any improvements needed, then we can definitely amend the budget for that.
And also, I guess if that is what is the best thing out there, because it is a very natural, one of our best parks. And many residents have asked for something else, like what is that,
Pickleball.
Disc golf.
disc golf is a great idea as well, or even a pond, a fishing pond.
Wait.
Where are you gonna get the water?
I don't know. I would just say,
Look, they did say it. There was a lot of people that wanted like a fishing pond
shade
and.
and Wi-Fi at the park.
Oh, yeah. What can we
and
do about
more
getting Wi-Fi
lighting.
in all the parks?
So I want to have the discussion if that is the best use of the money and what is it going to look like?
All right, any other amendments to the budget that wants to be proposed? Or if there,
Let me finish up, because I was trying to just ask the city manager for the feedback on that before we get too far along with the dog park, because that is the neighborhood that I live in.
Sure. So we can certainly bring you what's the design of the dog park. I believe that was recommended by the park board, if I recall correctly. So we can bring you a preliminary design for that. And then if the council wants to proceed with that, you can. If you decide you want to proceed with some other amenity, those are all things that you can do. But the funding in the budget would be the $75,000. So that
Set
would,
aside, just,
that's what's in the numbers for that particular park. So if you wanted other things, disc golf is frankly very inexpensive. There's not a lot of improvements for that. Although I don't know about the distances and things there. We'd have to look at that to see how it works. But fishing ponds, all those things, the dollars change and the expenses get more. So I think we can definitely bring it forward to you, and you guys can have that conversation about if you think that's the right location or not.
so one thing to do, like, because we can't answer those questions now, but if you wanted to make a proposal to increase the amount that's being considered, that's something you could do now.
thank you, Mayor.
Right. If you wanted to say you wanted a higher dollar.
Make it 100 or
Because
something
we,
like that.
right, because we have a baseline, and we know what we can get with that baseline would look like just fences and gates. So if that is where we go, that's not enough. My vision of a dog park is a green area with nice play features for the dog, water feature for the dog, shaded areas for the dog. It's not gonna be, let's just create a Viking fence, and this is what you get, because everyone's gonna be dissatisfied if that
Yeah.
is the result.
Yeah.
Well, the one at Steeplechase is slowly getting there, but it is exactly what you're saying.
Right.
It was not funded to the level that would really
That it
make it
needed.
usable, just being open. The one in Plum Creek's the same way. It's very open, it's very high. It's got a couple shade structures, but what I'm trying to say
How do I
is,
make it, Mayor, to allow that?
well, it's arbitrary at this point.
Right.
But if you increase the funding now, when there's time, it gives staff more direction as they're bringing forward proposals. They're going to try to bring forward a proposal that meets that,
Right, so I
that
wanna
number.
increase the
Just
funding.
think about the parkland,
Right.
the park restroom conversation.
Right.
What we had to do,
I
we had
know.
to increase but it came to us in a very particular way because of the budget.
Right, and that's
So-
what I don't want to see with this. Like, if,
So let's have a conversation about a number, either now or later, to increase the budget to or we need to give staff direction to not worry about that number and design to a particular outcome.
I know Brian wants to say something.
I do.
Maria.
Yeah, let me just, a couple of things. I agree with that whole comment. The first thing is, for the water leaf area, there are 3 particular things that we've included in this budget. There's $75,000 for the dog park, $75,000 for irrigation, and $75,000, I believe, for the landscaping improvements between the park and the wastewater treatment plant. So that's the dollars, 225 is kind of the overall number. It could be spent differently based on how you would do it. For the dog park itself, the 75,000 is a minimalistic budget, right? So it's a very basic park. Typically, you're going to need to spend $300,000 to $400,000 for a dog park to have play structures, fields that can be rotated, irrigation, and some kind of shade structures that you would put in there. So that's a number. If you want to make the quality substantially more, I would recommend that you think about 350 is. But if you're not sure the dog park is even what you want to have there, that's a different conversation. But if you want to make the dog park, a first-class dog park, I think you're going to need to spend, those are minimal dollars to get there. You can spend much more than that as well. I've seen that as well.
I'd like to see.
Wait, can we ask Mariana?
That's what I was gonna say. Why don't we
Jesus,
tell
can we
Mariana?
ask the person who's gonna build it?
Well, can we ask the person that lives there?
Well, you don't even know what she wants to bring.
Well, I live there. I pay.
But have you seen the proposal already?
No, I haven't
Then
seen
why
it.
don't we let Mariana?
I don't want to
Well-
make more than
Wait
one
a minute.
Well,
amendment.
obviously, it was being brought without any consideration of a design. It was just brought at 75K.
But just like the bathrooms, we made improvements as the
But
proposal
that
came
is a
in front
much
of
more
us.
difficult path.
Can we have?
How are
Mariana-
we gonna throw a number right now if we don't even know what she's going to propose?
What are you proposing, Mariana? Because we did have a talk about what you had in mind.
All right, Mayor and Council, Mariana Espinosa, Parks and Recreation Director. So with all budget requests, we request a fund amount, and we rarely bring forward the final plan, the final product. So if this item is to get approved, then we would go back and we would post the RFP and we would get the final plan and work with the design. So what we can do, though, is we can look at conceptual designs at what kind of dog park could go in the space that we propose. And they're just ideas. Nothing is final, nothing's set in stone, but they just be possibilities of what could go in the space. If it's not a dog park, okay, fine. But if it is a dog park, it was a recommendation by staff that was supported by the park board because we have a serious problem with dogs off leash at Waterleaf Park. So if the decision is to keep Waterleaf Park as a park that follows city ordinance where dogs must remain on leash, we definitely recommend a dog park. If at time down the road it turns into an off-leash dog park, well, that's different. We have to amend city ordinance. But right now, dogs must be on leash, and that's why we recommended the dog park. But we can definitely come up with conceptual designs, what could go there, but it wouldn't be a final design, a final product at all.
So, but to add to that, if we have 75,000 in the budget and we go out to RFQ, what they're going to propose is going to be within that budget parameter. So this is the appropriate time to set a higher budget if we know, but you got to be clear, we're going for a dog park. If you want to change it up, then we just got to wait. So I'm trying to help you get increased funding here for this thing, but we got to get clear on what we're trying to accomplish. If we want to say yes to the dog park, let's move this thing forward, but we don't want you to design to the minimalistic $75,000 standard, now would be the time to go to a higher amount. We're not committing the dollars, but we are allocating them. We are creating that window so that they can design a park to that number. And there's places where you can get that right now. So, but they're not going to be able to. They're not going to bring forward a bid for a dog park before we adopt this budget.
I think it needs to be a $250,000 dog park if we're going to do a nice, classy, or a nicer, greener, shaded, watered dog park, because we can look at steeplechase, and that's not enough. That's not enough for dogs.
So I have a question. If we increased it, then we'd have to increase the overall budget, because you just said there's 150 in addition to the 75, so what is it, 225? So what you want to do is exceed the total amount that we have allocated there right now just for the dog park. So you want 350, 250?
I wanted 250 just for the
Okay,
dog
so
park.
overall, 225 is allocated there right now. Yes, so it would be almost $500,000 for one park.
That is
Which-
next to a treatment plant.
We have, well, but hang on.
No, the treatment plant is next to the. yeah.
We have spent, I don't know, more than $500,000 on steeplechase. We've spent $2 million on Greg Clark Park. Waterleaf Park is a public park. It's not your neighborhood park. Waterleaf Park is a city park that is very large with a lot of amenities that attracts folks from all over.
Right.
And so to make a dog park there where not only Waterleaf residents, but other residents could use, makes a lot of sense. And if you're gonna do it, we might as well do it the right way,
That's what
just
I'm
as we're
saying.
trying to do with all of our parkland improvements. That's all I'm suggesting. So, I mean, I don't live there.
Right.
But it is a major city park in our community. If we're gonna go with the dog
I
park,
understand
we
the
should
want.
fully fund it.
I
That's all I'm
understand- I
saying.
understand the want. I just want to do it right, like you're saying, and not
But I
take
think-
shortcuts. With 75K, to me, is a shortcut.
So I think there's also other needs, like a place to sit or some shade for those baseball fields, that we shouldn't go all out on a beautiful big dog park, but have a nicer one that's 75,000 and then
Well-
allocate extra money for shading.
Well, how about this?
Can we increase the budget for the park itself? And
Right.
then let the Parks Department
Yes.
make the best recommendations of
Yes.
what will make the
Yes.
park?
That's what I'm
just
saying.
right
And I would
there.
say, since we've done 500 at Steeplechase, we did 500 at Greg Clark Park. Let's do 500, round number. It's a placeholder for now that gives them a larger parameter to determine
plan
what kind of
right.
improvements will make sense. And then they can bring that forward with a larger
I
budget.
agree with that.
Okay.
And this is 500 for the dog park?
No,
It's-
no,
No.
for the park
Okay.
overall.
I think what,
Yeah. The
I think
Parks
what-
Board's gonna decide that.
I think what you're asking for, if I understand correctly, is a $350,000 amendment to the city manager's budget to make a total allocation of $500,000 for this
Yes.
park, Waterleaf Park.
Yes, and I would suggest that we take it out of the $20 million number one downtown money, which is a very large amount. So I don't want to take it out of reserve funds, but we have a very large number with unallocated. It'll have a small impact. We're not going to spend that $20 million in the next 12 months. Let's take it out of there so that the budget stays balanced.
But don't include the wastewater treatment beautification. Take that out of the wastewater treatment. That's their own.
No, that'd be a different funding source,
Okay,
sir.
right,
So
So I don't want beautification to be attached to this 500,000, because that is the treatment plant itself expanding. $100 million over the next 5 years.
Well, I think what the proposal is that we plant the trees and the screening on the park side of the fence so that it's all in the park area to screen it. I don't know on the funding stream. I'd have to think through that for a little bit of whether or not we could use water and wastewater funds to plant
Beautiful.
trees on a park. But
Isn't it city property, city-owned?
it's city-owned property. But again, I think that we can look at the funding stream itself, but I think the bottom line is you're asking for a $350,000 amendment to the budget for future improvements at Waterleaf. To that
What
park.
page is the CIP stuff on? I'm sorry, I've lost it again.
Ninety and 91.
90 and 91.
Oh, wait,
All right.
look at the actual budget.
All right, so I'd like to make a motion to amend the 5-year CIP plan to increase the total amount of CIP for Waterleaf Park to $500,000 and to reduce the downtown redevelopment program by the amount required to make that increase.
Second.
All right, motion by the mayor, seconded by Councilmember Flores Cale. Is there discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, motion carries 7-0. All right, anything else before we go to number 2? All right, agenda item number 2, approve a resolution to record city council's vote to place a proposal on the agenda of a future city council meeting as an action item to adopt an ad valorem tax rate for tax year 2023 for the city of Kyle, making findings of fact and providing for related matters. Did you say there's a very specific motion that has to be made? Has someone emailed that to me?
No, not for this one. When we adopt the actual
Right.
tax rate, that's when you're going to need that.
All right, I'll
But
make a
for this item, Mayor, I just want to make sure it's on the record, very clear, that you're voting to consider a proposal at a future council meeting that the tax rate increase, you will consider a tax rate increase at a future meeting, because the no new revenue tax rate is lower than whatever the city manager is going to propose eventually.
Yeah, this budget that's being proposed is the voter-approved rate, not the no new revenue rate.
That's
So
correct.
that's what we're saying.
Yes, sir.
Bring back the voter-approved rate, not the no new revenue rate.
Yes, sir.
All right. Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by the mayor, seconded by Councilmember Flores Cale. Is there discussion on that motion? You want a roll call vote on
Yes,
this?
sir.
All
We
right,
have
roll
to
call vote.
record.
Bradshaw,
Aye.
Zuniga,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Tobias,
Yes, ma'am.
Heiser,
Yes.
Flores Kale,
Yes.
Parsley.
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, everyone.